Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable. See playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 761, The Red Circle. The woman at the internal elixir realm started registering Zen's information. Zen had been a bit worried, afraid that the woman would ask him where he came from. He had discussed this with Francis before and they decided that Zen should fabricate a new identity. Francis told Zen not to worry. According to him, the divine kingdoms didn't care where the warriors came from and would treat them as independent warriors. After all, to the four divine kingdoms, it wasn't important where the warriors came from as long as they had enough strength to obtain the resources from within the Feather Holy Sea. Once those resources were gathered, the divine kingdoms would receive a portion of them and that was what mattered to them. Moreover, the four divine kingdoms were surrounded by the sea. In tens of thousands of years, there had been few visitors from other continents. As a result, in the eyes of the emperors of the four divine kingdoms, every warrior in their territories would belong to their respective divine kingdoms. Zen answered each question without hesitation until the woman asked for his name. With a quick thought, he answered, "My name is Thad Luo." His real name, Zen Luo, wasn't suitable for him to travel in the divine kingdoms. He didn't want the Holy Maiden of the York Divine Kingdom to recognize him by his name. After registration, the woman smiled politely at Zen. She sealed all the information in a bamboo token and handed it to him. The first round of the exam is scheduled in 3 days. On that day, all the warriors of this martial house and the independent warriors will gather. I hope you will perform well. How kind, Zen thought to himself, though he knew she was being sarcastic. In her mind, this young man was a nobody and destined to fail in the first round. The competition in the divine kingdoms was rather fierce. There were only 50 licenses in the Jade Martial House, which meant that all warriors were fighting for 50 Harlan tokens. There were nearly 600 warriors at the Virtual Tribulation Realm alone fighting for the Harlan tokens in the Jade Martial House. Most of these warriors were at the late stage of the Virtual Tribulation Realm, which was much higher than the cultivation of this young man standing in front of her. Not to mention, the warriors trained by the Jade Martial House were much stronger than the independent warriors. There were also princes who participated in the contest fighting for the licenses. Randy was one of them, and he was certain he would be able to obtain a Harlan token. Besides, there were 200 or 300 independent warriors like Zen that signed up for the exam, and most of them were at the late stage of the Virtual Tribulation Realm. The young man in front of her seemed to have a good foundation and was already at the middle stage of the Virtual Tribulation Realm. At the age of 20, this was an impressive achievement, but it was still too early for him to obtain the Harlan token. The woman had no bad feelings towards Zen. In fact, she was sympathetic to him. She couldn't help showing her true thoughts through her humble smile. Zen glanced at her. He knew what she was thinking, but he did not care about her opinion. He smiled at her, grabbed the bamboo token and hid it in his pocket before leaving the Jade Martial House. 3 days later, Zen entered the Jade Martial House again. He showed the bamboo token at the entrance, and an escort privately guided him inside the Martial House. Zen saw a large square and most of the warriors were already present. Each warrior was emitting the aura of the Virtual Tribulation Realm. Zen looked around and his gaze stopped at the center of the square where he saw warriors at the Soul Sea Realm. They were a small group of 3. The divine kingdoms live up to their reputation. There are 3 warriors at the Soul Sea Realm in this martial house alone. It is possible that there are more in the Jade Martial House, Zen thought. The Jade Martial House was considered a 6th grade sect. If it didn't belong to the Harlan Divine Kingdom, it could be considered a sacred place. The Purple Heart Sacred Place on the Sea God continent was a 6th grade sacred place, and there were only 3 warriors at the Soul Sea Realm in the sacred place. For this reason, the Jade Martial House could be considered a 6th grade sacred place as it also had 3 warriors at the Soul Sea Realm. The Jade Martial House was a subsidiary of the Harlan Divine Kingdom, and the 4 divine kingdoms had countless mighty warriors. No wonder after all these years, they considered the central region a piece of barren land and very few warriors of the divine kingdoms were willing to go to the central region. Thinking back, when Zen had met the Holy Maiden and the Prince of York Divine Kingdom in Immortal Mist's celestial tomb, they had shown great disdain for the central region. Now Zen understood their arrogance. The 4 divine kingdoms were indeed strong. Even so, Zen did not cower. He was ready. His mentality was incomparably calm and strong. He knew that this path of cultivation was arduous and would make him feel miserable. He had no choice but to advance forward. This was his destiny. After entering the square, Zen was instructed to wait and was left alone. About 1,000 warriors at the virtual tribulation realm were standing around the square. They were all mighty warriors and were all observing each other. There were no signs of hostility on their faces. Instead, most of them looked calm and relaxed. Revealing hostility towards others would only bring unnecessary trouble. Only the weak would pay close attention to others all day long. The mighty warriors simply didn't care about the others and were focused on themselves. But the atmosphere was still somewhat heavy. Zen was standing in a corner with his hands behind his back, observing his surroundings. A knowing smile appeared on his face when he saw a familiar face. At first, he felt someone staring at him. Then, he turned his head and that was when he saw Randy. From the looks of it, even after being crowned a lord, Randy still had to participate in the examination and compete for the Harlan token with all his might. Francis's words were true. You could be the prince of one of the 4 divine kingdoms, but you wouldn't receive special treatment. You would be treated just as a common mighty warrior and have to rely on your skills to fight and pass the examination. Actually, this was understandable. How could an emperor control a great divine kingdom without cultivating the proper skills? In the end, an emperor had to rely on his own strength. If the princes and princesses of the divine kingdoms were too lazy to cultivate simply because their father was the emperor, none of them would be able to inherit the throne after the death of their father. Perhaps the position would be taken away by the other powerful warriors at the Soul Sea realm. For this reason, the emperors of the 4 divine kingdoms would cultivate their sons and daughters and make sure they enter the Soul Sea realm. Moreover, these princes and princesses needed to overpower the other warriors at the Soul Sea realm so that they could take over their position and rule the divine kingdoms. Zen noticed Randy was staring back at him, so he smiled politely. Randy merely glanced coldly at Zen before shifting his gaze elsewhere. Soon all of the candidates had arrived and gathered on the square. A steward entered the square and handed over a list to one of the 3 warriors at the Soul Sea realm in charge of the assessment. The warrior looked at the list and said, "The preliminary assessment to fight for the Harlan tokens has begun. This round is the simplest. Everyone will enter the square in batches, and with your own strength, you have to push the others out of the red circle. You can fight but you can't kill anyone. Violators will be severely punished." As the warrior spoke, he stretched out his hand and lightly patted the ground. Multicolored patterns appeared on the ground in the center of the square. The ground of the square was made of an unknown metal and looked rather heavy. Its outermost layer of decorative patterns had a red circle arranged around it. After hearing the rules announced by the warrior, all the warriors at the virtual tribulation realm remained quiet and didn't move. Zen was suddenly taken back to his first day at the Cloud sect. He thought about all the disciples who immediately started chatting with each other as soon as they heard about the exam. He felt quite nostalgic. Now he was at a whole other level competing against the strongest. The over 1,000 warriors at the virtual tribulation realm in front of him had different qualities. There were a few divine-level talents like Zen and Randy who had stepped into the virtual tribulation realm at such a young age, but most of the warriors at the virtual tribulation realm were not young. Their age ranged from tens to hundreds of years old. Naturally, they were not newbies who had just entered the martial world and got excited about everything. The mighty warrior at the Soul Sea realm announced the list of candidates in the first round. 30 warriors will participate in the first round. From these 30 warriors, only 3 will remain. In other words, 90% will be eliminated, he said. Zen closed his eyes in introspection while listening attentively to him. He finished reciting the names very quickly, and Zen didn't hear his name, Thad Luo. He wasn't included in the first round. The disadvantage of being called in the first round was that the warriors were not familiar with the rules and environment. The ones left out could observe the rules first and be on their guard when they came to fight. However, not being aware of the rules could bring advantages to the smartest warriors who knew how to use it to their favor. Soon, 30 warriors at the virtual tribulation realm entered the stage at the same time and stood within the red circle in the center of the square. The warriors were eager to begin the examination. The preliminary assessment was very important because the eliminated participants would be out of the competition and could no longer fight for the Harlan tokens. As a warrior of the Harlan Divine Kingdom, everyone knew the importance of the Harlan tokens. Chapter 762, victors. The moment the martial artists who were at the virtual tribulation realm entered the red circle, they quickly charged towards its center. This red circle was only a few hundred feet in diameter, and a martial artist who was at the virtual tribulation realm would be able to cross it in just one step. From the beginning, it was clear that every martial artist who entered tried their best to occupy the advantageous center spot in order to prevent others from pushing them out. "Get away! This is my place!" A warrior who was as robust as a gorilla roared to the others. This warrior was the first one who was able to get to the center point of the red circle. He stood there firmly while the warriors beside him glared at him ferociously, hatred and jealousy evident in their eyes. Despite that, the warrior stood sturdily in his place, his chin up. He was at the peak level of the late stage of the virtual tribulation realm. His temples were bulging, giving off a heavy aura, as if what he had practiced was an extremely aggressive cultivation technique. Because of that, no one dared to fight him for the central position. Just when the 30 of them had chosen their positions, a master at the Soul Sea realm came into view and announced, "Now the first round, begin." Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. As soon as the Soul Sea realm master gave the pronouncement, the life vitality of every warrior suddenly exploded all at the same time. Upon seeing this scene, Zen furrowed his eyebrows, and a strange look came over his face. He was confused and worried. The reason for that was because the power of the life vitality that erupted from those warriors was restricted inside the red circle. But after seeing that the other several hundred warriors didn't seem to be perturbed by what was happening, Zen felt relieved. For so many years, the divine kingdoms developed and honed their powers. Now, they were certainly more developed than the central region. Zen only felt strange about what was happening because it was his first time witnessing such a thing. If a martial artist at the virtual tribulation realm were to use his or her strength in its entirety, what kind of place would be able to withstand such destructive force? He thought, amazed by the whole thing. If the 30 warriors at the virtual tribulation realm fought each other with all their might, the Jade Martial House would surely be destroyed, let alone this plaza. But upon closer inspection, Zen found that the floor had been embedded with all kinds of patterns. Together with the red circle, they worked to prevent the warriors and their immense power from damaging the place. As Zen pondered over the magic that was holding the place together, the martial artists within the red circle had already begun to fight fiercely. The rule of this competition was very simple: step out of the red circle, then one was out. The last few ones who would be standing inside the fight area would be declared the winners. "Ha, that arrogant warrior in the middle would get ganged up on by the other warriors," Zen said as he started cackling. Although he said it in a very hushed voice, several martial artists at the virtual tribulation realm heard him. Slowly they turned their gazes at him, disdain on their faces. What Zen didn't know was that the sturdy warrior had the same exact background as him. He was also a famous independent warrior who had cultivated both his body and his life vitality. Moreover, the cultivation methods he had practiced were very powerful. In the eyes of many warriors, this warrior would undoubtedly be the one who would get a Harlan token. Because of that, when they heard Zen's comments about him, they immediately felt that Zen was too ill-informed and considered him as an ignorant prick. A few moments after Zen made his comment, action started happening inside the red circle. Inside it, as if on cue, nearly half of the 30 warriors went straight for the guy at the center. All of them looked like they were ready to kill him. No matter how powerful this burly martial artist was, how would he be able to take on a dozen virtual tribulation realm martial artists all by himself? The red circle was so small that the distance between warriors was only about half a step. The guy would not have anywhere to hide, and he would just have to face the attacks head-on. The warrior's face changed drastically at the moment he noticed that everyone was coming for him. He let out an explosive shout as he revolved his forceful energy and forcefully countered the attacks from more than half of the contestants in this round. Ha, bam, the difference in power between the two sides was evident, and it was enormous. After a brief moment of chaos, the warrior who had been at the center of the circle was pushed out of the fighting area. Puff, puff, puff. Breathing heavily, he spat out a mouthful of blood on the ground and glared at the people who had launched attacks on him. Less than a few seconds into the round, the most promising warrior had already been knocked out. It undoubtedly surprised many spectators who were expecting him to win the whole thing. The 3 powerful warriors of the Soul Sea realm looked at each other, a faint smile gracing their lips. The 3 of them seemed to have expected this to happen as well. The warriors who had mocked Zen and his comment earlier glanced back at him with a shame in their eyes. Their unwavering confidence a while back was replaced with shame and doubts. This fellow seemed to really have insightful observations, they all thought. Amongst all the warriors present, the only ones who had predicted this to happen were the three mighty warriors of the Soul Sea realm, and Zen. Aside from being strong, another thing that would help a warrior win this whole thing was wisdom. It might go unsaid, but it was the most important rule of the fight. From all the people that were inside the red circle, only 3 people would remain at the very end. None of them were willing to be pushed out, and many of them shared the same tactic: eliminate the strongest one first. Every martial artist had already evaluated each of their opponents the moment they saw them. You look weaker than me. Alright, since you don't pose much of a threat to me, I won't bother to wipe you out myself. You will either be knocked out by others, or when there are only a few people left in the circle, I will deal with you then. In any case, you are weaker than me, and it is only a matter of time before I defeat you. Why should I bother to waste my energy and time on you? That was a typical thought of many of the contestants in the red circle. Thus, everyone's goal from the very start wasn't to squeeze out the weakest, but the strongest. With such logic, who would be the first to be wiped out? Of course, it would be the fellow who looked the strongest. And it was exactly that arrogant guy who dared to occupy the most advantageous position inside the red circle. The moment he decided to take that center position, he already doomed himself to lose. The attack on him was instantaneous, and it was all his fault. It was out of instinct of survival that these martial artists chose to join hands against him. This test's main goal was not to pick the strongest among the fighting warriors. It aimed to see who was the best at making decisions, and maximizing his or her strength according to that. Being strong was a plus, but only if you played the game right, otherwise you would be under attack on all sides right from the start. Upon watching what was happening, Zen was able to realize why Jade Martial House organized such a test. A martial artist's overall strength didn't only include one's cultivation level and power. His or her real strength also had something to do with luck and wisdom. In many occasions, even if someone was the strongest warrior in the field, that person would be easily killed by the tricks played by the enemies. Unfortunately, the guy who was kicked out first had only strength, but no brain. Of course, it was not appropriate to say that he was completely brainless. After all, there weren't many martial artists who would be able to see the logic behind the fight's rules. If that were the case, wouldn't everyone be brainless? So in the end, the lesson that everyone should learn was, arrogance, having too much of it, would only end up as a disadvantage to someone. One must keep a low profile if one wished to accomplish high-profile jobs. Boom, boom, boom. After the first guy was out, the fighters left inside the red circle began to fight each other. The battle was chaotic. The mighty warrior at the Soul Sea realm who had announced the rules had clarified that killing was forbidden in the red circle, so everyone restrained themselves as they attacked their fellow warriors. Fortunately, no casualties were caused, thanks to the fact that no one had used a weapon in the fight and everyone's main goal was to force each other out of the red circle, not to kill. Despite those clear rules, in a fight among martial artists, it was virtually impossible to avoid sustaining injuries. Some martial artists were knocked unconscious under the combined attacks of several people, and then they were kicked out of the red circle like rice sacks. This scuffle lasted for about 5 minutes. A huge lump of the warriors had been thrown out at the beginning of the competition, some were directly thrown out, some were knocked out unconscious, and some timid ones had no choice but to leave the red circle due to the intensity of the fight. When only 10 fighters remained inside the red circle, they started being more careful. Slowly, they moved around carefully planning out their attacks. They were looking for opportunities to push the others out of the red circle, and also to prevent themselves from being thrown out. The speed at which a virtual tribulation realm martial artist moved was extremely fast. The 10 figures were zooming back and forth, and their figures started to look more like shadows. However, from time to time, someone would be thrown out of the red circle. When there were only 6 martial artists left, the rate at which people were thrown out of the red circle slowed down. At this time, everyone was even more cautious. Among the 6 martial artists, 3 of them would be able to stay and win the round. So every one of them had half a chance of passing the test. A few of them were fighting, but some were not and were just looking for the most advantageous moment to attack. However, if these virtual tribulation realm martial artists did not fight, the Jade Martial House would have a way to make them fight. Suddenly, the red circle began to shrink. First, it trembled slightly and started to close up towards the center. The way it was narrowing was slow, so the warriors inside had the time to plan their next move. Despite the time that was being given to them, they couldn't help but panic. The fighting area was getting smaller and smaller, and they would have to make a move in the next moments. Boom, boom, boom. The first martial artist who had lost his patience was the first to be thrown out of the red circle. Following that, 2 other warriors were also instantly driven out. The battle had come to an end, and the remaining 3 martial artists became the victors of the first round. Chapter 763, The Arrogant Lord Randy. 2 things had become clear to everyone after the first test round among the virtual Tribulation Realm warriors. First was to move fast, and the second was to keep a low profile. Those who hadn't entered the circle had begun to size each other up again. They all took note of those they thought were pretty powerful. Strategy was key, and it would be best to force the stronger ones out of the circle as soon as possible. This meant that the well-known, top-level virtual Tribulation Realm warriors were at a disadvantage. Sure, they might have been stronger than the rest, but their fame meant the others would work hard in eliminating them first. A low profile was the key strategy for these types of tests. The less your opponents saw you as a threat, the longer you could skirt around the edges and survive. Out of everyone, it was Lord Randy that was seen as the probable biggest threat. Although he was not a member of the Jade Martial House, he was still someone who was able to obtain his fiefdom at such a young age. His strength was also only inferior to the Divine Kingdom's Crown Prince. Everyone's minds thought of the same question: if all 29 virtual Tribulation Realm warriors united against him, would he be able to fight through them all? Lord Randy, of course, was not oblivious to what went on in the minds of the other warriors. Their stares made it very obvious. He snorted. Only the weak would waste their time with tricks, he muttered to himself. He had chosen to go to the Feather Holy See in the name of a lord, and that meant he had to overcome all the obstacles and pass this test lest he brought shame upon the royal family. A couple of warriors wouldn't be enough to stand in his way. Zen was regarding the situation with slight interest. His cultivation base was only at the middle stage of the virtual Tribulation Realm, and he was a stranger here in the Harlan Divine Kingdom. His low profile was already a given, and he could effectively use it to his advantage. Looks like these guys already figured out how to play this game, a Soul Sea Realm master laughed heartily. I hope we get some powerful young fellows this year, another remarked. Last year's journey was the worst harvest our Divine Kingdom had. We'll be in big trouble if that happens again this year. We have to make sure that our Jade Martial House does better. The Soul Sea Realm Master's worries were not displaced. The costs of establishing and maintaining these martial houses came straight from the Divine Kingdom's deep pockets. They were built for the sole purpose of training elites who would discover and bring back treasure and resources from the Feather Holy See. A portion of the spoils went directly to the Divine Kingdoms, while the rest went to upgrading the martial houses. In other words, a return of investment. It was this type of system that made it possible for Divine Kingdoms to build more martial houses that then trained more elites and then brought more treasure for the Divine Kingdoms. This was the main reason why the 4 Divine Kingdoms evolved to such a formidable degree. One of the 3 Soul Sea Realm Masters unfolded a scroll and began to start the roll call for the second round's participants. Joseph Bo, August Tao, Virgil Wan, ... Zen looked back at the red circle that had now returned to its original size. It seemed it wasn't his turn to participate yet. It was all right. It didn't matter if he took his turn earlier or later. After the participants got settled, the second round of testing began, and everyone's attention was now focused on the battle. It was a quicker fight. The second round only lasted for less than 5 minutes, as 3 out of the 30 participants were declared the winners. Then there was the third round, and then the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh. In the 8th round of roll call, Zen finally heard his name. Thad Luo. The Soul Sea Realm Master called his assumed name. Zen nodded, quickly stepping towards the red circle. He didn't make an impression. He was only at the middle stage of the virtual Tribulation Realm, and his face was unremarkable. Nobody knew him, and everybody thought of him as a nobody. They regarded Zen as someone who would easily be eliminated and forgotten. If he did manage to pass the test by luck, no one doubted for a second that he would be kicked out in the succeeding rounds. It was only Lord Randy who looked at him with interest, but Zen pretended to ignore him. The 3 Soul Sea Realm Masters also couldn't help but give Zen a second look. This young man seems to have a very stable cultivation base. His strength seems to be comparable to an average warrior at the late stage of the virtual Tribulation Realm, one of them commented with certainty. His colleagues nodded. I wonder where he's from. I feel a sense of danger from him. I have no doubt that he will be able to win against a warrior at the late stage of the virtual Tribulation Realm. I think you're underestimating him, the third master said. I think he can kick a late-stage virtual Tribulation Realm warrior's butt quite easily. No questions asked. Even in the 4 Divine Kingdoms, cases of a virtual Tribulation Realm warrior defeating a life and death realm warrior was pretty rare, almost unheard of. Zen, despite insisting on maintaining a low profile, could only do so much to hide his extreme potential, which still led to the three Soul Sea Realm Masters' positive assessment. If only they truly knew of his strength, that Zen was able to defeat Eddie, a 4th grade life and death realm warrior. Of course, they would never believe it. Those who had never seen Zen's strength would never be able to imagine the true extent of his powers, which often led to others underestimating him. This was exactly how he managed to lure Master Wallace into the central region. 30 participants were announced consecutively, and all of them got ready for this round of testing. The last name was Lord Randy's. All the other participants, save for Zen, visibly trembled in shock. Everyone knew of his strength and no one wanted to fight him. The only choice they could think of was to band together and kick him out of the circle as soon as possible. Lord Randy walked towards the center of the red circle and smiled when he noticed the fear in everyone's eyes. Nobody had ever dared to occupy the circle's center ever since the first round. It was the best position for someone who wanted to be everyone's target, but not necessarily for someone who wanted to win by survival. However, Lord Randy did not care about strategies and keeping a low profile. He was callously indifferent to everyone that was within the circle with him. His implications were clear: he didn't care if they all came at him, he'd be able to defeat them anyway. A hyena might have a hard time resisting a flock of sheep. But he was not a hyena. He was a lion. Lord Randy was a lion, and the flock of sheep before him could either only flee or perish in his wrath. "Only I will emerge victorious in this round," he announced in a loud, clear voice. "I will kick you all out." His arrogance overwhelmed his opponents with fear. Some of them couldn't even raise their heads to look him in the eye. If another warrior had done that, his opponents would have simply banded together to shut his mouth and defeat him. However, Lord Randy was different, because they were all well aware that his arrogance stemmed from his unprecedented power. They weren't even sure if they'd be able to defeat him even if they joined forces together. Zen slightly shook his head at the other participants' reaction. "This guy's smart," he thought to himself, pertaining to Lord Randy. "He knows he's famous, so it would be useless for him to keep a low profile. Therefore, he's doing the exact opposite by scaring everyone into submission with his arrogance." If his opponents were too scared to band together, then they could never hope to defeat him. Arrogance came from power, and if everyone was aware of how powerful one truly was, they would not question one's arrogance and instead fear his potential. The round of tests soon quickly began. The other warriors were immediately abuzz with discussion at this interesting round. "Who do you think will be eliminated first? Do you think it'll be Lord Randy?" "I don't think so. He's too powerful. Nobody would be dumb enough to challenge him. I bet that guy Thad will be first to go. He's just at the middle stage of the virtual tribulation realm." "What a joke." "Yeah, do you see how weak he looks? How could he possibly defend himself against his opponents? One single hit would be enough to send him flying. Look, someone already targeted him. I guess it's time for him to say goodbye." The discussion was lively, especially with the thought of Zen's swift defeat. The warrior that had targeted him rushed fiercely towards his direction. "You're the first to go, Pipsqueak." Zen's eyes gleamed with contempt, but he reined himself in. Instead of a counterattack, he skirted through the edge of the red circle and quickly sidestepped the oncoming warrior. Chapter 764, Pursue Relentlessly. As much as possible, Zen intended to maintain a low profile. To avoid showing off his real strength was his technique to gain a spot in the red circle. After all, there would be only 3 left. With his current standing, it wasn't going to be difficult. As long as he constantly dodged the attacks, he could easily face a group of martial artists at the later stage of the virtual tribulation realm, despite the red circle's limit in size. In addition, his cultivation level wasn't enough to gain all the attention. He wasn't everyone's main target at that point. To his surprise, a fellow warrior had attacked him for no specific reason, aiming to kick him out of the ring. That had left Zen confused. Whoosh! The air shifted as Zen's figure floated, circling around the edge of the red circle. Since the beginning, Zen had always faced that same martial artist. Interesting, he thought with a faint smile plastered on his face. He managed to maintain his calm demeanor. After Zen avoided the first attack, his opponent should have known better. Logically, he should have just given up. Zen didn't want to cause any trouble and didn't even launch a counterattack. No one expected for that man to keep on charging towards Zen. He refused to let him go. The light that appeared out of his fist gleamed brightly, as if telling everyone that he wasn't going to stop until Zen was out of the ring. "Get out," the man sneered as he hurled another attack on Zen. Huff huff huff. Stealthily, Zen's movement flashed as he constantly tried to sidestep each and every attack coming from his opponent. Something was wrong with that fellow. That warrior had already given up on his defense and was focused more on putting all of his force on the attack. With that kind of technique, kicking someone out of the ring was going to be easier. There was no known conflict between him and Zen, so what he was doing was completely unnecessary. It gave the impression that he didn't care about passing the exam anymore. He only wanted to eliminate Zen even if it meant risking his own life. Was there someone else behind all of that? Who was ordering him? From the corner of his eyes, Zen could see Randy. He let his gaze land on the man. With his hands clasped firmly behind his back, Randy stood in the middle of the red circle. Faint particles slowly began to revolve around him. Even if the virtual Tribulation Realm warriors were in the middle of a battle, none of them dared to make a move on him. His eyes were on Zen. "I knew it. It's him," Zen said in a low voice as his expression darkened. "He has always targeted me ever since I joined the martial house. What is his problem with me? Why does he want to make things harder for me? Did he send someone to test the limits of my strength?" Zen thought to himself. Given his current strength, Zen could just easily finish off the man who was after him, but at that time, he was a bit hesitant. Something didn't seem right. From his point of view, the best way to obtain the Harlan token was to move in silence. Even if the outsiders thought of him as a lucky guy, he still needed to keep it low. Then, he planned on using the token to enter the Feather Holy Sea to get life stones. Attracting everyone's attention was the last thing Zen wanted. However, being targeted by someone like Randy from the moment he entered the martial house wasn't such a good omen. It looks like no one wants to face up against Lord Randy. Even when he's just standing still, not one soul interferes. His reputation is just extraordinary. Of course, he is already regarded as a powerhouse warrior among his young peers. He is second to the Crown Prince and Edwin Shao from the Dark Martial House. However, those three have yet to determine a victor. If they fought, I don't think that Lord Randy's chances of coming out victorious would be small. Lord Randy seems to be fixated on that young man. That young man has already run 7 or 8 laps around the red circle. He has been dodging all the attacks this entire time. Can't he fight back? What a disgrace. A young man in his early 20s was enjoying the battle that went down before him inside the red circle. Nonchalantly, he muttered, "Disgrace. Huh, he has been chased by a martial artist at the later stage of the virtual tribulation realm for so long, but he remains unscathed. If you think that is disgraceful, then I wonder what no disgrace is." The young man who spoke was the strongest powerhouse of the younger generation of the Jade Martial House, Gregory Zahn. If the younger generation of the Harlan Divine Kingdom were to be ranked, he could enter the first tier with the Crown Prince, Randy, and Edwin from the Dark Martial House. Originally, Zen had always been unremarkable. Unlike some warriors who had to be trained in the Jade Martial House, Zen was just an independent warrior with a cultivation level of only the middle stage of the virtual tribulation realm. No one really paid attention to him. Because of what Gregory told, everyone's doubtful eyes were on Zen. Is this man as strong as Gregory said? It wasn't just Gregory who sang such praises. The 3 Soul Sea Realm Masters who were watching the fight from the side were also looking at Zen. They didn't even pay attention to Randy's performance. After all, he had come under the spotlight for a long time, and it was a foregone conclusion that he could obtain the Harlan token. As the son of the ruler, it was almost destined for him to acquire a token even if all the other 29 people worked together to expel him from the Red Circle. The Soul Sea Realm Masters were more interested in new warriors such as Zen. Although there were a lot of independent warriors who had grown up outside martial houses, they still couldn't compete with the talents of martial houses. The Soul Sea Realm Masters didn't expect Zen to be as strong as a talent like Randy. Out of all the current virtual tribulation realm warriors of the Harlan Divine Kingdom, only 4 could enter the first tier, and 36 could enter the second tier. The 40 people in the first and second tiers definitely had Harlan tokens. After all, both the Jade and Dark Martial Houses, which happened to be 6th grade martial houses, had a total of 100 Harlan tokens. The other 3 5th grade martial houses also had their own talents who represented them. For the Jade Martial House, it was quite a big deal for Zen to enter the 3rd tier and obtain the Harlan token. Unfortunately, only a few independent warriors of the Harlan Divine Kingdom had such an ability. Even if they did, their name list could have already been checked by the 3 Soul Sea Realm Masters. However, the latter showed great interest in Thad more than anyone. They didn't know much about Thad's origin, but they didn't ignore his immense abilities. As an indication that he was having a hard time making a decision, Zen moved around the red circle. He was hesitant to make such bold moves, but if he didn't, there was no other way to get rid of his opponent. He had originally hoped that someone else kicked the man out of the competition instead of him. During the chase, quite a number of martial artists were eliminated, but no one acted against his opponent. That was certainly not the way to go about it. At that thought, Zen's eyes suddenly flashed. His body briskly twisted like a snake, and he suddenly rushed towards the center of the red circle. While he charged, he purposely avoided Randy. However, something unexpected happened. Randy originally stood motionlessly at his original position, but just as Zen was about to approach the center of the red circle, he smiled faintly and then formed a claw with one hand. As he lightly waved his strong right hand, 3 sharp claw prints shot towards Zen from the sky. Those claw prints moved at a great speed and had closed up Zen's paths in all directions instantaneously. If Zen wanted to pass through, he could only take them head-on. As for the warrior who had been after Zen for quite a while, his aura had grown even stronger, and he had no other goals but to force Zen into a corner. At that moment, Zen's figure flashed as he traveled through space for a distance and walked to the other side of the red circle. The 3 claws that Randy had tossed missed him and went straight for the warrior standing right behind him instead. No one could have predicted that Zen could travel through space. An obvious shock could be seen on Randy's face as well. The warrior who had previously chased after Zen had his mouth open as he collided against Randy's paw prints. Puff puff puff, 3 sharp claws instantly cut open that warrior's robe, and then a crisp sound could be heard. It seemed as if his protective armor had been cut into pieces as well. Then, dark red blood started to spray out of his body. Seeing that he had accidentally injured one of his own, Randy only coldly snorted. He didn't care about that warrior's life, nor his death. His eyes once again followed Zen. No one knew what he was thinking, but after the missed blow, he remained standing exactly where his feet were planted moments prior. Since no one was chasing after him, Zen felt much more relaxed. He let out a sigh of relief which he had seemed to be holding on for too long. There were only a dozen or so people left in the red circle, and they were still fiercely fighting with each other. Despite the intensity of what had just gone down, they still had the same objective, and nothing could stop them from attaining it. The battles during that round were a bit more intense than the previous ones where they fought for the last 3 places. With the presence of Randy, it became tougher. No one dared to challenge him. Therefore, he had claimed 1 spot as his, while the rest fought bloodily for the remaining 2 places. Chapter 765, How did he do it? The competition was highly intense and not many remained. Numerous warriors were kicked out. Zen was extremely cautious and agile. Whenever someone wanted to target him, his body would suddenly flash without the slightest bit of warning and he would distance himself from them, going far beyond their reach but still staying inside the circle. In the red circle, no one had a clear goal and they had not decided just one person that they wanted to take on. Instead, they were trying their best to kick out as many people as they could until there were only 3 people left. In such a scenario, obviously very few people would stubbornly chase after Zen all the time. Be that as it might, Lord Randy's gaze, which was as vicious as that of a venomous snake, was still locked onto Zen all the time, which made him feel extremely unhappy. Similarly, just like Lord Randy, the 3 powerful masters who had reached the Soul Sea realm had also focused their gazes on Zen. He is well versed in the space law and even seems to have fully grasped its 2nd layer. This boy has good potential. Judging by the strength he is currently showing, he can be considered a divine-level talent. He has the ability to reach the 3rd tier in the Harlan Divine Kingdom. You know, I won't be surprised if he manages to make it to the top of the 3rd tier as well. Someone like him deserves a Harlan token, but I'm a bit worried. With their sharp insight, how could the 3 powerful masters at the Soul Sea realm not see that Lord Randy was targeting Zen? Lord Randy has already declared that he alone will obtain the Harlan token in this round. I'm afraid that with his strong cultivation and powers, it won't be hard for him to keep his word. What worries me is the possibility that he will make a move against Thad. Alas, I have rarely seen such talent among independent warriors. I hope he can pass the test. Well, it's going to be a bit difficult. Only 4 people in the Harlan Divine Kingdom are in the 1st tier, and the difference in the strength of warriors between the 1st tier and the 2nd tier is extreme. Only if this Thad reaches the top of the 2nd tier will he be able to contend with Lord Randy. Of course, Zen didn't know that these 3 powerful warriors of the Soul Sea realm were worried about him. Lord Randy was indeed highly interested in Zen. When he had taken part in this test, he had planned to pay special attention to the young guys who took part in the test too. He had originally planned to search for talented people inside the Jade Martial House. However, the person who was ranked first in the Jade Martial House was the Crown Prince's right-hand man, who went by the name Gregory. He was perfectly loyal to his master and it would be impossible to win him over, but this young man in front of Lord Randy was different. Randy had a special talent when it came to reading people, which was a trait he had inherited from his father. From the very first moment he had seen Zen, he felt that this young man's strength wasn't as simple as it appeared to be. Those powerful masters at the Soul Sea realm could only assess Zen by his current performance. According to them, Zen's strength was only at the top of the 3rd tier, but in the eyes of Randy, this guy who was constantly running away from everyone who tried to target him was deliberately hiding his actual strength. He estimated that Zen might not be able to reach the 1st tier, but it wouldn't be a problem for him to reach the top of the 2nd tier. More importantly, he had never heard of this person before, which meant that as far as Randy was concerned, the guy was nameless. Therefore, he assumed that the latter wouldn't be favored by the Crown Prince. How could Randy let such a good chance slip by? The only thing Lord Randy needed to do now was to test Zen's true strength. The first attempt to test his strength had already ended. It was true that Zen's display of the space law had amazed Randy, but he wasn't satisfied at all. This boy's strength was definitely much greater than that and mastery of the space law was certainly not his trump card. The problem was that Thad was way too cunning. He avoided all the warriors and kept himself from fighting anyone. This way, it was impossible for anyone, let alone Lord Randy, to measure his true strength. They didn't even know if he could truly fight. As the number of martial artists in the red circle dwindled, a faint smile appeared on Randy's face. His chance was finally going to be here. More fortunately, it looked like he would have to test Zen's true strength all by himself. Very soon, only 5 martial artists were left inside the red circle. Other than Randy and Zen, there were 3 other virtual Tribulation Realm martial artists contending for a place now. Now, since the space that each of them could move in had grown larger due to a lower density of warriors, it was difficult for them to drive each other out. Of these 5 people, only 3 were going to stay in the end. No one was willing to be thrown out at this moment since they all had fought hard to reach this stage. Therefore, everyone was extremely careful and cautious, and the situation was in a deadlock. At this moment, the red circle began to shrink. From what they had seen in the previous rounds, everyone understood this clearly, that the red circle would shrink very quickly. The moment that it began to shrink, the result of the round was going to come out within minutes. So as soon as the shrinking began, everyone's expressions changed from concentration to alarm. They began to go all out in their attacks against the other martial artists. Energy Destruction Fist, Heart-Shattering Palm. 2 of them roared as they engaged each other. Other than carefully avoiding Lord Randy, the 3 other martial artists were using their trump cards to stay inside now. 2 of the warriors were fighting each other, which meant that the third one, who would obviously not go to challenge Lord Randy, had to target Zen now. When Lord Randy saw that someone was chasing after Zen, a smile appeared on his face again. How are you going to run this time? He thought. Zen was well aware that he had no choice but to strike back. Seeing that the martial artist was rushing towards him, Zen gently took a step forward and adjusted his breathing to the best rhythm. His strength began to flow through his body. At this moment in time, an extremely peaceful aura was being emitted from his body and he was in perfect harmony with everything around him. The virtual Tribulation Realm martial artist who was attacking Zen had been able to stay inside the circle till now, which showed that his strength was not to be trifled with. In terms of power, he was at the top of the entire Jade Martial House, and he could easily secure a place in the 3rd tier of the Harlan Divine Kingdom. The martial artist took a step forward. His figure flashed like a tiger, and his hands transformed into 2 gigantic claws as he struck out towards Zen. Ah! A fierce beast which resembled a tiger condensed on his body. As he placed one claw up and the other claw below it, the mouth of the beast had opened and was about to swallow Zen in one gulp. The virtual Tribulation Realm warriors of the Divine Kingdoms weren't to be underestimated. This person's strength alone was comparable to a top-level warlord of the Demon Knight. He was probably only very slightly weaker than Esther. However, if he really wanted to fight for the seat in the Tower of Sin, then he would definitely be able to rank himself among the top 10 seat holders. Everyone was guessing about Zen's strength right now, but Zen was taking a shot at the strength of the person in front of him. Since you've picked me to fight with, then you should be out. Zen's footsteps became light as his figure slowly retreated. While the red circle was shrinking, Zen was retreating with his back facing the line that defined it. As he shot backward, Zen instantly arrived at the very edge. If he paused there for a few seconds, he would automatically be out. However, Zen's feet only lightly touched the edge of the red circle, his tap as gentle as if a feather had stroked the rim. However, just as his toes touched the ground, he suddenly began to look intimidating and aggressive. Forceful energy. Explode. Swoosh. In that instant, Zen's aura changed dramatically as his entire body turned into a thin line and charged towards his opponent like a bolt of lightning. Before the enormous phantom of the vicious beast could bite down on him, and before the opponent's claws could meet together in an attempt to crush Zen, he had already arrived in front of his opponent. The fierce-looking warrior in front of him was determined to win this battle. As long as he could get rid of Zen, and the battle between the other two ended, there would only be 3 people left in the red circle, so he would definitely pass the test. No matter what happened, he had to pass the test. It was a crucial step which might influence his whole life. Therefore, he went all out to fight against Zen. He wanted to finish Zen in a single blow. In his eyes, Zen was nothing but a coward who only knew how to run away. Yet, at the very last moment, he clearly saw that Zen was retreating, but somehow, the fellow had appeared before him just as his eyes had blinked due to some sort of lightning flash. What was going on? This was impossible. The warrior was dumbfounded. He stared at Zen blankly, not knowing how to react. Zen ignored his dumb expression. He reached out his hands and grabbed his opponent's hands. With a light snap of his 5 fingers, Zen locked the pulses in the warrior's arms. This way, the warrior's life vitality was going to be unable to reach his hands, making it even harder for him to break free from Zen's grip. In fact, it was an unnecessary move for Zen to lock his pulses. His opponent had already forgotten how to revolve his life vitality and break free. While the warrior was still in a trance, Zen let go of his pulse and grabbed him with one hand. He then swung him around like a windmill, and threw him out of the red circle. It was such a smooth and clean stunt. The truth was that for martial artists at lower realms, this way of battling was very common. But once they reached the internal elixir realm, the strength with which one's life vitality burst out would be extremely terrifying and no one would dare to go near them. As a result, in the battles in the red circle, warriors were often driven out by other warriors' forceful attack and strength, but nobody had been thrown out like that till now. At this time, when they saw Zen directly throw a martial artist out of the red circle, the other martial artists were also so shocked that they couldn't utter anything. The same doubt crossed their minds: how did he do it? Chapter 766, Push Comes to Shove. Thud. The virtual tribulation realm martial artist was thrown out of the red circle and he fell heavily onto the ground. His was in a much better state compared to other martial artists who were hurt or even heavily injured. The fall couldn't hurt someone like him, especially at his level. But the embarrassment was too much. He would rather be injured and carried out than be chucked out like this. It was truly a great humiliation for him. However, he quickly regained composure when he got up. Martial artists in the Divine Kingdoms knew much more than those in the Central region and the Sea God continent. He knew that Zen's speed was truly extraordinary. The distance, angle and timing were all perfect. He had summoned all his strength to prepare his attack on Zen. That was why he hadn't been able to react quickly and had allowed Zen to get so close to him. There was only one explanation why Zen could make such a judgment. He was quick to react and his judgment was accurate. He had fought in countless battles, so he had this kind of fighting instinct. Such a fellow was undoubtedly terrifying. Keeping this in mind, the martial artist took a deep breath and observed Zen carefully. However, there was no hatred in his eyes, only reverence and fear. Those who had personally experienced Zen's wrath could understand how terrifying it was. Everyone was also quite shocked. Although the martial artist was embarrassed to be forcefully thrown out by Zen, as a third-tier member, he was powerful beyond doubt. None of the people present had the guts to mock him. Most people were just surprised that he was thrown out. They didn't see how Zen had done it. He was simply too fast. On the other hand, the 3 powerful warriors of the Soul Sea realm wore serious expressions. I have underestimated this guy. Given his strength, he definitely isn't just a third-tier member. I'm sure he has the strength to reach the 2nd tier. If I'm not wrong, he just used the forceful energy. Has he cultivated both body and life vitality? It was rare to come across warriors who cultivated both body and life vitality anywhere. The Sea God continent, the Central region and Divine Kingdoms were no exception. Zen had just wanted to end the battle quickly. If it dragged on, he would have to reveal more trump cards. And he wanted to keep them hidden for as long as possible. Therefore, he chose to directly use his forceful energy. The 3 powerful warriors of the Soul Sea realm were shocked when they saw this. Gregory, Randy, the Crown Prince, and Edwin, who formed the 1st tier, were the inheritors of the Harlan Divine Kingdom. It was likely that they would inherit the legacy of the kingdom. Therefore, it was very difficult for an ordinary virtual tribulation realm martial artist to be included in the first tier even if they were extremely powerful. The characters in the first tier were the best martial artists with supreme strength among divine-level talents. This was the strength of the 4 divine kingdoms. They never lacked divine-level talents. Now that the world of chaos had begun, there were more and more super talents in the current era. Back in the day, it was an extraordinary feat for a divine kingdom to have 10 to 15 divine-level talents. If properly nurtured, these divine-level talents would definitely step into the Soul Sea realm in the future. However, in the last few decades, the world of chaos had begun and subsequently, divine-level talents had begun to appear in large numbers. In just a few years, there were over 100 divine-level talents already in the Harlan Divine Kingdom. The 4 members of the first tier were able to defeat all other divine-level talents. But they felt that Zen wasn't qualified to be counted among them. However, the strength he had displayed was enough for him to stand at the top of the second tier. Now they had a completely different impression of him. It was not that easy to join the second tier, but Zen had managed to reach the top of the second tier. The Harlan Divine Kingdom had countless large and small martial houses, and 90% of the talents were in 2 major martial houses, the Jade Martial House and the Dark Martial House. They were highly gifted. Their achievements today were the combined result of resources and careful cultivation. Thad was an independent warrior. No one knew where he cultivated. How could his resources be compared to the Harlan Divine Kingdoms? He had just appeared out of nowhere. Among independent warriors too, there were some who were more impressive than others. However, Zen was better than all of them. Randy smiled faintly as he stared at Zen. He then said in a low voice, "It is not enough. This is not your full strength. Let me see your full strength." With everyone's eyes on him, Zen sighed to himself thinking how naive he was. The vision and strength of martial artists in divine kingdoms were beyond his expectations. If he wanted to pass the examination, he would have to show his strength. There would probably be more trouble. He hadn't forgotten that Randy had once said that he was the only one who could pass this examination. As predicted by Zen, one of the other 2 warriors had won. The loser was driven out of the shrinking red circle. According to the rules, the results should have been announced by now. Zen, Randy, and another martial artist had passed the examination. However, Randy looked back at the 3 mighty warriors of the Soul Sea realm and winked at them, so they didn't announce the result. They knew Randy had interest in Zen and wanted to test his strength thoroughly. The Harlan token was a hard-earned badge for martial artists, but it wouldn't be difficult for Randy to obtain one given his status and strength. Even if Zen were to be eliminated, it shouldn't be too difficult for him to obtain a token as Randy had showed interest in him. Since that was the case, they wanted to see Zen's true strength. Randy laughed. "As I said, only I can pass this round. Would the 2 of you like me to send you out of the circle, or would you like to leave by yourselves?" Zen was calm as he had long predicted that this would happen. He couldn't avoid a fight with Randy at this point. The other martial artist became even more depressed. A trace of anger could be seen on his face. Lord Randy has gone too far in bullying us, he thought. I have gone all out to pass the examination, but now, he wants to break the rules and kick me out. He seethed inwardly. There wasn't much time left. From the moment the red circle began to shrink, only 300 seconds were left. The confrontation in Randy's talk had taken 135 seconds. "I have already passed the examination. Why are you?" the martial artist protested. He was unwilling to accept this, but more than that he was unwilling to fight Randy. All he could do was to argue with him. "Shut up," yelled Randy. "I don't want to repeat my words a second time." He stood in the center of the red circle, while Zen and the warrior stood on either side of him. As the red circle continued to shrink, the 2 had to move closer to him. As the martial artist saw the distance between him and Randy closing in, he clenched his teeth and began to sweat profusely. Clearly, he was not convinced. However, looking at Randy who stood not far away, he knew that he was no match for him. If he fought the Lord, he would be humiliated and seriously injured. What was worse, there would be more unforeseen trouble. Finally, he gritted his teeth and stood still. The red circle kept shrinking and moved past his feet. He was eliminated. Many warriors looked at him with pity in their eyes. This was a tough examination and the probability of passing it was low as 90% of the participants were eliminated. This martial artist had passed the examination, and yet he was forced by Randy to quit the game. What a shame. Chapter 767, Lord Randy Lost. Randy was the beloved son of the Emperor of Harlan Divine Kingdom. He himself was a superb talent that belonged to the first tier. Even if the warrior was not willing to quit, he could do nothing. Since the entire Harlan Divine Kingdom belonged to his father, none of the warriors living in the Divine Kingdom dared to resist any kind of decision he made. No one could afford to offend the Imperial members. The Divine Kingdoms were just like this. Compared to sect leaders, the Imperial members were more domineering, condescending, and unreasonable. Even the powerful warriors at the Soul Sea realm would show the utmost respect to Randy, even though he was only at the Virtual Tribulation realm, due to his family background. Despite that, fear or indecision couldn't be found on Zen's face. He continued moving forward as the red circle shrank, his gaze firmly fixated on Randy, who was in the middle of the circle. Seeing that, Randy just smiled at Zen and asked, "What about you? Do you also want to give up?" Although he had only met Zen twice, he could tell that Zen was a man who was proud of what he could do. He had always been accurate in his judgment, and so he knew that someone like Zen would never easily give up. Of course Zen wouldn't give up. He had traveled all this way here just to obtain the ancient jades to save Letitia. And doing so was no small feat. But then, he was not sure if he was really going to fight Randy. Upon his initial observation, he concluded that the guy was not weak at all. Although Randy had only attacked him once, Zen already thought that he was probably slightly stronger than Esther. And although Zen hadn't seen Amber fight in the Tower of Sin, he was sure that Randy's cultivation level would be more or less similar to hers when she had just become a top-level warlord 200 years ago. Of course, that was only his rough estimate. He didn't know for sure what Randy could do. Despite that uncertainty, Zen felt no fear. He had even killed Eddie, who was a warrior at the life and death realm. He didn't think Randy would be stronger than Eddie. The problem was that this was only the first round of the assessment. To be honest, it would be impossible for him to unleash all of his strength if he wasn't in a life or death situation. With that, Zen started scheming. How would I be able to defeat this guy without showing him and everyone in here all I have? He thought carefully, his eyebrows slowly furrowing. If Randy knew what Zen was thinking, he would probably faint from anger. Fortunately, he had no means to do that. And also, all he wanted to do at that moment was test Zen's strength as much as possible. As time passed, the red circle kept on shrinking. Zen continued moving forward, and the distance between him and Randy grew shorter and shorter. 30 feet, 20 feet, 10 feet. For warriors at the Virtual Tribulation realm, at such a close distance, they could no longer use some of their moves or attacks. Zen and Randy stared into each other's eyes, as if reading each other's thoughts. Strength. This was a battle of pure strength. At this moment, all of the candidates on the square were already holding their breaths. Whatever happened in the next seconds would definitely be something they were not expecting. On the one hand, they admired Zen. He was actually able to stay in the red circle even if he was only at the middle stage of the Virtual Tribulation realm. This only proved how much of a mighty warrior he was, yet no one had heard of him before. It was hard for them to imagine how he had grown up. On the other hand, they also couldn't help but mourn for Zen in their hearts, as he was assigned to the same round of examination as Randy. If Zen was not in the same round as Randy, then with his strength, he would have easily passed the test. But now, he had to face Randy directly. No one knew what would happen next. As they grew closer and closer to each other, Zen's vigilance was rising. Something is not right, Zen thought, still looking at Randy. His strength most likely exceeds my expectations. Tension was starting to build in his chest. Randy had seen Zen use forceful energy before. With that, the spectators naturally concluded that he was a body refiner. Well, it was a stupid idea for a warrior who refined life vitality to compete with a body refiner in physical strength. It was an extremely wrong decision for Randy to close the distance between them. Uncannily, Randy was not afraid at all. It seemed like he was just waiting for Zen to get closer. It was now obvious that Randy had some sort of plan to deal with this situation. Could it be that he himself was a body refiner? Or did he cultivate both body and life vitality? Since you must have it in for me, then I'm sorry, but you're going down. Zen thought, getting ready to finish this round. It was not that Zen was underestimating Randy. The strength that Zen had and the opponents he would choose were no longer at the same level as Lord Randy. Just as the two of them were only half a meter apart, the corners of Randy's mouth curled up into a sly smile. Suddenly, a strand of pale blue forceful energy instantly appeared from within his body. Moreover, as soon as that forceful energy appeared, another strand of life vitality appeared. Forceful energy and life vitality were two completely different types of energy. Forceful energy was born from one's own body, but life vitality was created by nature and could be absorbed by warriors. Although Zen would often let out his forceful energy and life vitality at the same time, still, they were two very different systems to him. But Randy had actually fused them together. How was he able to fuse the two completely different types of energy together? And what should the new type of energy be called? Even though Zen was knowledgeable and had seen a lot of things, he was still shocked when he saw this scene. Everything that existed in the divine kingdoms couldn't be underestimated. After fusing the forceful energy and life vitality, Randy spread out his hands and pushed towards Zen. However, he didn't punch Zen. It seemed that he truly wanted to compete with Zen in physical strength, and that he didn't have any intention of harming him. Caution was starting to color Zen's already shocked face. He circulated the power in his hands and caused the forceful energy within his body to erupt. At the same time, he also used the power of the dragon scales. Originally, Zen had planned to use only forceful energy to deal with Randy. After all, he was only at the late stage of the virtual tribulation realm, and Zen thought that would be more than enough. However, when Zen discovered that Randy was able to fuse forceful energy and life vitality, he immediately changed his mind. He couldn't underestimate Randy. Even so, Zen had only absorbed about half of the power of the dragon scales. Soon after, Zen also outstretched his arms, his palms open. His speed was not that fast, but a shocking power was contained in his palms. Bang! Zen's palms collided with Randy's. A muffled sound burst out. The floor covered in patterns underneath their feet suddenly shook violently, and cracks began to appear on it. Crack, crack, crack. Since this square was used for the exam of warriors at the virtual tribulation realm, the materials that were used to build the floor had been processed meticulously to fit the purpose. Previously, when there were so many warriors at the virtual tribulation realm fighting, not a single trace of crack was left. But this time, numerous cracks appeared on the floor just as Zen's and Randy's palms collided. Zen was still pondering on how Randy was able to fuse the two types of energies together. What cultivation method is he cultivating? It is indeed amazing, he thought. Zen managed to block this special energy in the end. Although the floor beneath his feet cracked open, he still stood firmly in place. Under Zen's explosive power of dragon scales and his forceful energy, the previously relaxed expression on Randy's face suddenly changed. Zen's hidden power was too huge. Even though Randy was able to sense that Zen was not a simple warrior upon seeing him, he had never thought that he would be this powerful. He was born and bred in the Harlan Divine Kingdom. Because his talent was outstanding, he was doted upon by his father. Although there were many princes in the Harlan Divine Kingdom, his talent set him apart, and because of that, the resources he received were abundant and generous. In this environment, his knowledge expanded, further than anyone else in the kingdom. With that, he knew that Zen's strength shouldn't have appeared in a warrior at the virtual tribulation realm. Even a warrior who had experienced a life and death crisis would find it difficult to resist Zen's strength. Just how did Zen manage to do it? His force was so hard to resist that it was like the tides of the ocean. A human would not be able to withstand such force. Although he was overwhelmed by this sudden realization, Randy was not willing to back down. He would see this test to the end, and he would succeed. There was no way he was going to retreat after all the boasting he did a while ago. He would rather Zen back out of the red circle right now and admit defeat. He would personally give a Harlan token to Zen. After all, their purpose of competing in the exam was for the Harlan tokens. It was just a Harlan token. However, it was too late to say anything now. Under Zen's overwhelming power, he had no choice. Thus, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Randy retreated. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Without doing anything flashy, he crossed the red circle. However, that wasn't the craziest thing to happen in this whole round. As Randy continued retreating, his steps also became unsteady. In the end, everyone saw his legs weaken and he actually fell onto the floor. Everyone stared blankly at him, speechless at what was happening. Randy, whose talent was ranked in the first tier, actually was invincible among the young generation. In the entire Jade Martial House, only Gregory was comparable to him in his power. In the entire Harlan Divine Kingdom, only Edwin and the Crown Prince could match up to him. Randy and Zen weren't fighting to the death just now, it was just a simple contest of pure strength. Without a doubt, however, in a battle of strength, Randy was at an absolute disadvantage. Chapter 768, Drawing Zen In. The air was heavy as silence hung like a thick curtain. Hundreds of warriors at the virtual tribulation realm stared in marvel at the scene unfolding in front of their very eyes. The eyes of the 3 mighty warriors at the Soul Sea realm glinted with an ethereal light. These 3 warriors were the leaders of the Jade Martial House, one of them was the head and the other 2 deputies. In the Harlan Divine Kingdom, they were considered the pillars that held the weight of the whole land in their shoulders. Naturally, they knew well the strength of Randy. Randy was a formidable opponent. Not only did he cultivate both body and life vitality, but more importantly, his physical constitution combined with the imperial family's cultivation method could perfectly fuse forceful energy and life vitality. The 2 forces, when combined together, gave immense power to whoever wielded it. With this fusion, his strength surpassed that of anyone of the same level as him by leaps and bounds. Randy had not yet used his trump card. As of this moment, he had only used his fusion technique. However, Zen had not used any of his special moves as well. He had only used some of his forceful energy and half the power of the dragon scales. Just like this, Randy lost to Zen. The 3 leaders of the Jade Martial House observed Zen, pleasant surprise written on their faces. Could this man's talent be ranked in the 1st tier? Is it possible that his strength would be on par with Lord Randy's and the Crown Prince's? They all thought. Regardless of whether they believed it or not, they couldn't deny what they had witnessed with their own eyes. This man stood with his victory as clear as day, and they had the inkling that he had more to show them. We misjudged him. This man is simply a monster. I really don't know where he is from. One of the 3 leaders said. Ha ha, it doesn't matter. His presence will greatly benefit the Jade Martial House. Let us not discuss the disputes between Lord Randy and the Crown Prince. Since this man is participating in the assessment in the Jade Martial House, he naturally belongs here. Another leader said. We're in luck. Edwin Shao of the Dark Martial House has overpowered our warriors. Now we have Thad Luo. I bet he is no inferior to Edwin, the 3rd leader said. Gregory, the number 1 virtual tribulation realm warrior of the Jade Martial House, stared at Zen as anticipation raced through him. His face held faint traces of excitement. Thad Luo. The name had a foreign sound, and it was one he had never heard of before. Gregory's heart pounded wildly in his chest. Had the time and place been different, he would have already challenged Zen to a duel. However, this was the assessment of the Jade Martial House and he was in the presence of the 3 leaders. He would not mess with the rules. Gregory would not mess with the rules of the Jade Martial House. But Randy did whatever he wanted. The Harlan Divine Kingdom had many princes, but Randy's status seemed so different from that of the princes who were not favored by the emperor. Half of the Crane City was in Randy's possession. Even the rules bent to his every whim. Who could stop him if he wanted to challenge anyone? Ha ha, Thad Luo, right, good, very good. A crazy smile appeared on Randy's face as he stared at Zen. Since you've already passed the 1st round of the examination, this matter shall come to an end. Now, I challenge you. As soon as Randy finished speaking, a violent aura surged forth from his body. Underneath the cover of this energy, the expressions on the faces of the many warriors at the virtual tribulation realm instantly shifted. This was not an aura that a warrior at the virtual tribulation realm could possess. Lord Randy's true strength must be on par with that of a warrior at the life and death realm. He's really strong. With this much power, even a warrior at the 1st grade of the life and death realm would be no match for him. Thad Luo is in trouble. Zen frowned slightly as Randy's aura surrounded him. Truth be told, he was quite displeased. Why was this fellow acting like this? He was here to participate in the exam, not to challenge others. Zen shook his head and said, I refuse. Randy was shocked at his answer. What, are you being serious? Why do you refuse my challenge? Do you not want a Harlan token anymore? He asked him defiantly. Then his expression turned into a knowing smile and he continued, if you accept, I will give you a Harlan token. And aside from this, you can choose what you desire from my treasures, regardless of whether you win or lose. Lord Randy's treasures. Everyone's eyes lit up at Randy's declaration. Randy had countless rare and precious items. His wealth alone was comparable to what the Jade Martial House had accumulated in all of its years. If Zen could pick whatever he wanted, he could easily earn in one day the fortune that an ordinary man could only dream of in his lifetime. Randy promised Zen that he could pick whatever he wanted regardless of whether he won or lost. Even if he lost to Randy, he had more to gain than lose. His loss would bear him no shame. This is a lucky day for Thad Luo. Everyone eyed Zen with a mixture of wonder and envy as they thought of the prize that was waiting for him. Any one of them would jump at the opportunity presented to him. To everyone's shock, Zen still firmly shook his head in refusal. I would have to decline your offer. I only need a Harlan token. With my strength, I can get it for myself. I don't need you to give it to me, he said. Who does this arrogant mongrel think he is? Randy inwardly fumed. He thought that he had been more than generous in his offer. Any man would feel honored to be challenged by him. He was Lord Randy, and whichever way the duel turned, whether he won or lost, he would be rewarded handsomely. Why was this man being so stubborn? A flaming red crept up Randy's neck and face. His eyes narrowed in anger as he flushed indignantly, like a volcano that would erupt at any moment. Alas, Lord Randy is intelligent, but he is still too young in years. One of the 3 leaders of Jade Marshall House sighed helplessly. The other 2 leaders nodded as well, sharing his sentiments. Currently, the Crown Prince and Randy were in competition with one another. They were the 2 most outstanding young men in the entire Harlan Divine Kingdom, and the future Emperor of the Divine Kingdom might be one of them. Randy was younger, but he rose steadily to the first tier. One had to say that his future held a glory more than that of the Crown Prince. The 2 were similar in strength, but the Crown Prince was older than Randy by more than 10 years, and the difference in age had given him a steady and composed demeanor. The Crown Prince had not only won over Gregory of the Jade Marshall House, but had also won over Edwin, the number 1 warrior in the Dark Marshall House. There were only 4 warriors in the first tier. The Crown Prince, Gregory, and Edwin were in a group. Randy was alone. The most troublesome thing for Randy was that he had no followers. In front of him right now was the perfect target. But this man had proved to be increasingly stubborn. Randy did not have any malice towards Zen. He challenged him because he was unconvinced, and at the same time, he also wanted to win over him. Randy was too proud to admit defeat. As of the moment, the 2 men's pride clashed against each other. Talents like Zen almost always had arrogance as great as their skills. Randy wanted to use his family background to bend others to his will, and the situation was escalating quickly when Zen refused him. All the 3 leaders sighed and shook their heads. One of them stepped forward and with a benevolent smile coaxed, "Lord Randy, I know you want to challenge Thad Luo today, but this is the assessment. It would be improper to start a fight. There are more fitting times and places. How about you challenge him another day?" "Master Randy retorted with a hard-headedness telling of his youth and inexperience. He knew full well that the leader's words were sensible, but he refused to listen to reason despite this fact. "Lord Randy, listen to me, Master," he smiled meaningfully. The next moment, there were only faint movements of his lips. He was using life vitality to speak to Randy, so the others had no way of distinguishing his words. After a long while of what seemed to others as merely tense silence, Randy finally gave a slight nod of his head, and the imposing aura around his body dissipated. His face relaxed into a calmer expression as he beckoned to Zen. "I admit defeat. You are indeed a powerful warrior. I'd like to make friends with you, Thad. I will invite you to my house for a feast some other day." Zen, on the other hand, stood in bafflement. There was a glaring contrast between Randy's earlier attitude and current one. Who knew what he was up to? Of course, Zen was unsure. There were all sorts of conflicts going on in the Divine Kingdoms. After he had accidentally shown his strength, he might have unintentionally dragged himself into one of them as well. No matter what Randy was up to, it had nothing to do with Zen. Now, he just acted accordingly. As he was in the Harlan Divine Kingdom, it would do him no good if he embarrassed Randy. Paying his courtesies, Zen nodded and gave a polite salute to him. Only after Randy left did the crowd seem to breathe again. In the middle of the seeming calmness, Gregory observed quietly from the side, his eyes following Randy as he left. Then, quietly, he turned to look at Zen, a trace of vigilance flashing through his eyes. Although Gregory was a member of the Jade Marshall House, he worked for the Crown Prince. The conflict between the Crown Prince and Randy had been going on for a long time. Zen had appeared out of nowhere and displayed tremendous strength. Whether or not he could win over Zen was a secondary matter, but such a character would not be allowed to follow Randy. He had to inform the Crown Prince of this matter as soon as possible. Chapter 769, Ancestral Dragon. Zen was not interested in the internal strife within the Divine Kingdom. He only cared about getting the Harlan token. After passing the test today, the warriors had to return to the courtyard they had previously registered in. After passing the test, Zen had become a member of the Jade Marshall House. The woman at the Internal Elixir Realm who was in charge of registration looked curiously at Zen. She wondered how Zen passed the test given that his cultivation was only at the middle stage of the virtual tribulation realm. The woman took Zen's bamboo token back and gave him another purple token. This purple token was still not the Harlan token. She informed him that from now on he was allowed to enter the Jade Marshall House to study and practice, as well as to obtain a portion of the resources of the Jade Marshall House. Other independent martial artists would be honored and excited at the chance to have access to the Jade Marshall House's materials and training facilities. The cultivation for independent warriors was extremely arduous, so it was a great opportunity for them to join a martial house to advance further. Zen, however, was not interested in studying nor using the resources of the Jade Martial House. Zen didn't lack cultivation techniques or pills. He had completely relied on himself to improve his cultivation and, as of now, the martial house would not be of much help to him. The only thing that could help him was the Harlan token. Zen left the Jade Martial House and met Francis, who had been waiting outside for a while. Zen had given him an order beforehand, telling him to wait there for him so that they would return to his residence together. Francis did as he was told. He didn't dare disobey Zen. Along the way, Zen played with the purple token in his hand. After thinking for a while, he asked, "How long do you think it will take me to get the Harlan token and enter the Feather Holy See?" Francis smiled and replied, "One of the 3 secret lands will open every year, but I'm not sure which one will open this year." The Feather Holy See contained the Feather Emperor's secret land, the Divine Emperor's secret land, the Mysterious Dream secret land, and the Heavenly Stellar's secret land. Except for Feather Emperor's secret land, Zen didn't care about any other secret lands. He was expecting the Feather Emperor's secret land to open this year, or else it would be extremely disappointing. "Is there a way to know which secret land will open this year?" Zen asked with a frown. "I guess so, but the opening of a secret land is controlled by the rulers of the 4 divine kingdoms. It is up to them to decide which secret land will open. I don't know if it is possible to approach the rulers and ask them about this. I believe it will be a little difficult to get this information," Francis replied. Zen took a deep breath. If the Feather Emperor's secret land didn't open this year, he would have to wait for another year. He couldn't wait that long. He didn't have much time left. What should he do? Zen was not strong enough to influence the decisions of the rulers of the 4 divine kingdoms. "I see. You can leave now," Zen told Francis. He nodded and left the room. Zen sat cross-legged and slowly directed his strength to spread out his life vitality. He was prepared to cultivate for a while. The Cyan dragon in his mind began to speak. "Zen, aside from the Feather Emperor's secret land in the Feather Holy See, there is another secret land you must enter." Zen's eyes flickered. He was confused with this new information coming from the Cyan dragon. Everything he knew about the Feather Holy See and the secret lands had come from Francis. It was the first time the Cyan dragon mentioned them. Could these secret lands and the Cyan dragon be somehow related? Zen's goal was to get to the Feather Emperor's secret land where the life stones came from. He wasn't interested in the other secret lands. There are the Feather Emperor's secret land, the Divine Emperor's secret land, the Mysterious Dream's secret land, and there's also the Heavenly Stellar's secret land, right? "You must enter the Heavenly Stellar's secret land," the Cyan dragon continued to say. "Is there something you need from the Heavenly Stellar's secret land?" Zen asked curiously. Zen knew that the 9 genuine dragons came from the genuine dragon world. What he didn't know was why these 9 dragons attached themselves to the mysterious furnace and why they had turned into a page of a book and got into Zen's mind. These were mysteries he was eager to solve. Once he asked the Cyan dragon, but he avoided the questions and instead gave him a vague answer. There was a secret around this and Zen needed to know what it was. Back when Zen first entered the genuine dragon world through the Dragon Soar arena, the Cyan dragon had acted all mysterious and didn't want to reveal his identity to the martial artists of the dragon lineage human. Zen started wondering if the Cyan dragon held a grudge against the genuine dragon race, or if there was a great enmity between them. These were only his wild guesses. If the Cyan dragon didn't want to reveal his secrets, then Zen shouldn't insist. Even when Zen entered the Sea God continent and practiced the martial arts there, the Cyan dragon hadn't offered his opinions or made any requests. This time, however, he was asking Zen to enter the Heavenly Stellar secret land. So there must be something important there or something he needed. Could it be related to the 9 dragons? The Cyan dragon smiled bitterly and said, "Have you heard the story about the origins of the Feather Holy See?" Zen shook his head. He hadn't even heard of the name Feather Holy See, not until recently when Francis told him in return for Zen sparing his life. When Zen traveled across the chaotic ocean of stars and arrived in the Harlan Divine Kingdom, he was surprised to know there was a vast inland sea in the continent surrounded by gigantic towering city walls. He wondered why the 4 divine kingdoms had put so much effort into accomplishing such a huge project. What did they do it for? What was the purpose of this construction? "The Feather Holy See used to be ours. It was the territory of our genuine dragon race," the Cyan dragon said with a hint of sadness. "Your genuine dragon race's territory?" Zen's eyebrows twitched as he asked with a soft voice as if feeling the Cyan dragon's sadness. "To be more precise, this territory belonged to a branch race of our genuine dragon race, that is the dragon lineage human, the Cyan dragon said. In the past, the dragon lineage human were the rulers of this continent. They occupied the most central region of the entire Divine Kingdom continent, the Feather Holy Sea. At that time humans had 7 divine kingdoms. These divine kingdoms joined forces and fought against the dragon lineage human. This war went on for tens of thousands of years. It was a horrific war taking the lives of millions. Finally, under the relentless joined attacks of the 7 divine kingdoms, the dragon lineage human used a blood sacrifice to open up a space channel. From this space channel came a genuine dragon that annihilated 3 divine kingdoms with a single blow. At that time, the 7 divine kingdoms had the support of the human race from the upper world. The 4 divine kingdoms that survived in the end had destroyed the entire dragon lineage human. So now the continent was ruled by the 4 divine kingdoms. The blood sacrifice had come at a great cost and didn't help the dragon lineage human to achieve their final victory. The 4 secret lands are, in truth, the remnants of the dragon lineage human's legacy in this world. Before the members of the dragon lineage human were exterminated, they used the power of blood sacrifice once again to seal off the entire Feather Holy Sea with the cost of the lives of the entire race. They wouldn't allow the inheritance of the entire dragon lineage human to be exterminated, the Cyan dragon added. Now, after so many years, the power of the dragon lineage human's blood sacrifice has begun to weaken. The 4 remaining divine kingdoms took the legacies of the dragon lineage human as their own treasures and have slowly developed into the powerhouses they are today. I never thought that some small 6th grade divine kingdoms would develop so much and so quickly. In the past, the 7 divine kingdoms were considered 6th grade sects, but now the 4 divine kingdoms could be considered 8th grade sects. It was a huge difference and upgrade even with just 2 grades in between. The Demon Knight sacred place located in the Sea God continent with Amber as the leader could only be considered a 7th grade sacred place. What exactly is in the heavenly stellar secret land? Zen asked curiously. He was wondering what the Cyan dragon was looking for and why he wouldn't just tell him once and for all. The Cyan dragon answered, in the past, the dragon lineage human of the lower world summoned a genuine dragon through blood sacrifice. That genuine dragon is our eldest brother. Eldest brother? Zen was shocked at the revelation. There were 9 genuine dragons drawn on the mysterious furnace. These 9 genuine dragons were of different sizes and lengths, and had different powers. But underneath the furnace lay the strongest and most intimidating genuine dragon. He had been asleep all this time and until now only the Cyan dragon and Red dragon had awakened. Yes, our genuine dragon race spread throughout a million worlds. Not everyone could use the blood sacrifice and successfully summon a genuine dragon to come for help. The reason why my eldest brother personally answered the call was because the dragon lineage human had discovered an ancestral dragon egg in their world. This ancestral dragon egg is currently in the heavenly stellar secret land of the Feather Holy Sea. The Cyan dragon finally revealed what he was looking for. An ancestral dragon egg? What is that? Zen felt confused and astonished at the Cyan dragon's words. He had never heard of the ancestral dragon egg before. The Red dragon laughed. It's very simple to understand. The ancestral dragon egg is the egg of the ancestral dragon. There is only one ancestral dragon in this world and it is immortal. After it dies, a new ancestral dragon egg will be born and then it will hatch and the dragon inside will become the new ancestral dragon. Chapter 770, The Crown Prince and Lord Randy. Whoever can control the ancestral dragon shall have the power to control the genuine dragon race. As the most powerful super legendary beast, there is no way we are ever handing over the ancestral dragon egg to the human race. The Red dragon said. Zen listened close, not even saying a word as the Red dragon spoke. The Red dragon continued, the war in the Divine Kingdom continent was actually a war between the human race and the genuine dragon race in the lower world. Unfortunately, the human race never expected that after my eldest brother was summoned out by the blood sacrifice, he destroyed 3 divine kingdoms. In the instant of space collapse, he used a secret method to destroy the ascending passage of this world. Therefore, none of the living beings in this world can fly to the upper world anymore. What? Zen's eyes flashed as he heard such words. Being unable to fly to the upper world had always been a problem for this world. After reaching the Soul Sea realm, warriors originally could step into the path of the Immortals. The likes of Miguel, Amber, and the Soul Sea realm masters of the 4 divine kingdoms had been stuck within this boundless world and unable to fly to the upper world. Other than the Dragon Soar arenas, there were no other known methods to ascend. All living beings knew that there were problems in the world. However, not a single solution had come. Some questions remained unanswered. In the end, all of the Soul Sea realm masters who could have ascended were trapped in this world until they just died. After the 5 aging processes, they weren't able to do anything more and got swallowed whole by depression. It was the last thing Zen had expected. It was the Cyan Dragon's eldest brother who had destroyed the flying passage of his world. Why did your brother destroy the flying passage in the first place? Zen asked. The Cyan Dragon sighed before answering, it was because of the ancestral dragon, of course. The egg was born in this great world, so my clan took care of it and let it hatch slowly under their wing. However, that had become known to humans, hence the war. So that's how it is, Zen said after a moment of silence. In other words, the reason why you asked me to enter the Heavenly Stellar Secret Land is to obtain the egg and hand it to the genuine dragon race. The genuine dragon race? Huh, the red dragon snorted with a trace of disdain. His tone was evident with anger. Brother, the red dragon had something more to say, but the Cyan Dragon stopped him. That's right, Zen, I want you to get the egg, but it must not be returned to the genuine dragon race, the Cyan Dragon said. The longer their conversation went, the more Zen got confused. It seemed like both the Cyan Dragon and the Red Dragon had some sort of conflict with the genuine dragon race. The last time Zen had entered the genuine dragon world, he had already noticed some problems but didn't say anything because he was an outsider. Even so, he was going to try his best to help as much as he could. After all, the 2 dragons had contributed greatly to his accomplishments. Naturally, he also had his own doubts regarding the situation. Even if the egg is in the Heavenly Stellar Secret Land, those Soul Sea Realm Masters are unable to get their hands on it. With my current strength, I'm not sure I would succeed. Zen knew so little about the relationship between the 4 secret lands. But since they were located within the Feather Holy Sea which was surrounded by the 4 divine kingdoms, he assumed that the Soul Sea Realm Masters would have entered in search for the egg if they could. The Cyan Dragon smiled and said, the Heavenly Stellar Secret Land is different from the other 3 ones. It is impossible for them to obtain the egg, but I believe you may stand a chance. What the Cyan Dragon said gave Zen a boost of confidence that he never knew he needed. He nodded and said softly, if that's the case, then I'll do my best. Although he wasn't entirely sure that he could successfully help the 2 dragons obtain the egg they wanted, he was willing to give it his best shot. The first thing he had to do was to enter the Feather Emperor's secret land and look for the life stones hidden inside it. Whether or not he succeeded depended on how the things could go next. Instead of leaving his house for other things, Zen focused on his training every day. Without his order, Francis stayed close to the door, too. 3 days later, Zen suddenly heard faint footsteps coming from behind the door, followed by a high-pitched voice. Here comes the Crown Prince. People without fixed duties, stay out of the way. The Crown Prince is here. Zen's brows rucked slightly. Soon after, he heard Francis's voice from outside. Master, the Crown Prince of Harlan Divine Kingdom is here. Zen acknowledged before he got up and left the room. A small smile hung on his lips, but he felt somewhat strange. What did the Crown Prince want from him? When Zen walked out of the house, he saw the grand scene outside. Dozens of life and death realm masters wearing golden, embroidered gowns, with silver blades hanging on their waists, lined up by the door. He swept his gaze across them and saw that their blades were all at least low-grade sacred weapons. Somehow, they all looked the same. It was no secret that the Harlan Divine Kingdom boasted the technique of forging sacred weapons. In front of those life and death realm guards was a young man on a wheelchair. He looked very sick, but his eyes beamed a strange light. When he caught Zen's gaze, he smiled. One of the eunuchs spoke up in a shrill voice, kneel down at once and greet the Crown Prince properly. How could Zen kneel before him? Glancing coldly at the eunuch, he thought to himself, you come to my door for no particular reason and then ask me to kneel. What kind of logic is that? Then, the Crown Prince reproached, don't be rude. The man in front of you is a top talent in our kingdom. Men have backbone. What makes you think he'd just kneel down upon your order? But, Your Highness, you are this kingdom's crown prince. In the future, you will. The eunuch's voice shook as he tried to explain. Silence. The Crown Prince criticized him severely, and then smiled at Zen. I'm sorry about that. He has always been rude. Please don't take it to heart. It was a petty drama that was unfolding before Zen. He could tell by one look that both the Crown Prince and the eunuch were only putting an act to make him believe that the Crown Prince thought highly of him. That was the first time they ever met. That little trick he pulled caused Zen to grow wary of him. He was scheming. Deep down, he had developed a strong aversion towards the Crown Prince. After he came to the Harlan Divine Kingdom, Zen didn't want to attract any attention on him. However, Randy gave him problems during the examination, and now the Crown Prince had come to his house personally. The more he didn't want to be noticed, the more all these people knocked on his door. Now that he stayed in their kingdom, he couldn't just ignore or kick those people out. He had more important things to focus on. "Your Highness, what brings you here?" he asked nonchalantly. With a smile on his face, the Crown Prince replied, "I heard that you passed the examination of the Jade Martial House as an independent warrior, so I wanted to meet you personally. You do have an impressive appearance with great talent. It really shows." "I'm very flattered. The truth is, I'm nothing but a boor," Zen responded after thinking for a moment. With the same smile, the Crown Prince said, "Come on. Let's not stand on politesse. There's a banquet at my house today. I would appreciate your attendance." Right after he spoke, he shot a look at the eunuch. A smile had crept on the eunuch's face as well. He took out a shiny golden card and handed it over to Zen. As he looked at the card in the eunuch's hands, Zen was a bit hesitant. Did he really want to be there? At that moment, he had figured out the purpose of that visit. Most likely, the Crown Prince wanted to draw him over to his side like Randy, but he was more polite. It was the way of the world. Those who showed you courtesy weren't necessarily your friends. As Zen was contemplating whether or not he should attend the party, another voice from not too far away had reached their ears. "Brother, why didn't you come to see me after you arrived at the city?" It was Randy. Surprisingly, he was alone and didn't have any attendants with him. The green robe he was wearing swayed as he strolled over towards them. He looked at the Crown Prince and then smiled at Zen. "Thad, how have you been?" Feeling even more baffled than he already was, Zen only nodded slightly. What did Randy and his brother really want? Chapter 771, Being Watched. Randy had extended his challenge to Zen just a few days ago. So it was kind of weird for Zen to see him act as if they were the best of friends who hadn't seen each other for a long time. The smile was frozen on his face. "I've been fine," Zen said through his teeth. Randy put his arm around him in a brotherly manner before taking the golden invitation from his hand. He flipped it over before handing it back to the Crown Prince. "Zen's already promised to go to my place today, so your invitation is just way too late." When had he agreed to visit his place? Zen had just received the Crown Prince's invitation and was just thinking about what to do when Randy came out of nowhere and acted all friendly with him. Still, he appreciated his intervention. Despite Randy being arrogant and temperamental, he had an air of integrity around him. The Crown Prince, on the other hand, was too shrewd for Zen's taste. Zen was not going to pass up this perfect opportunity to reject the Crown Prince's invitation. He nodded his head as if to show his agreement with Randy's words. "It is indeed too late to invite me now, Your Highness. Lord Randy's already invited me to his residence," Zen said, patting Randy's hand as a signal for him to get his arm off his shoulder. Randy's hand refused to budge from Zen's shoulder and there was a huge smile on his face. Back when his cultivation level was still very low, the Crown Prince did not even bother batting an eyelash at Randy's direction. However, he gradually grew stronger and climbed the social ladder to a point wherein he could stand on the same ground as the Crown Prince. Still, the Crown Prince was over 10 years older than Randy and was set to inherit the throne. Despite being conferred the title of Lord as recognition of his strength, Randy had fewer followers compared to his brother. The Crown Prince had recently heard of the warrior that had triumphed over Randy at the Jade Martial House. His interest was instantly piqued and he knew that he had to establish a relationship with this exceptional warrior. He had traveled from the capital all the way to Crane City just to see Zen to draw him to his side. But, it just so happened that Randy had burst out of nowhere and interfered with his plans. Of course he knew that these two only pretended to be close acquaintances to fool him. He was a Crown Prince and he knew how to play this game. And sometimes, he played his cards right and knew when to fold. He was not at a position to force Zen to do anything, so he took the magnanimous route and gave a hearty laugh. "A shame, it seemed I did not come here on time. You did arrive rather abruptly." "I admire your speed," Randy retorted. There was a trace of hostility that flashed through the Crown Prince's eyes, but his face remained calm. With a smile he spun the wheelchair around and left, his entourage of masters following closely behind him. It was only then that Randy dropped his arm off Zen's shoulder. There was a triumphant cold smile on his face as he watched the Crown Prince leave. "Aren't you brothers?" Zen asked. "Why do you have to go against each other like this?" The internal struggles of the Divine Kingdom's royal family baffled Zen. Warriors were incomparably selfish, but they paled in comparison to the royal family and just how much they schemed against their own flesh and blood. "I treat him as my brother, but he doesn't even treat me as a person," Randy replied coldly. The expression on his face could only be described as both furious and anguished. There must be some awful memories between the two brothers for them to have this much animosity with each other. However, that was their issue. Zen knew it wasn't something he really wanted to embroil himself in. Just as he was thinking of where he should go now, Randy nudged him. "So you're going to my place today, right?" he asked with a crafty smile. Zen scoffed, this unbelievable. He had played along with Randy's ridiculous lie in order to reject the Crown Prince's invitation, but now, it seemed as if the matter was actually serious. "Don't worry, I won't put you in an awkward situation. It'll be fine as long as one of us wins over the other," Randy said, but also lowered his voice. "My brother won't give up on you so easily. He has probably already mobilized his people to keep an eye out for you. If you don't go to my place after you rejected his invitation today, he'd surely come to meet with you another time." Zen sighed in defeat. It truly seemed that he had no choice. "Fine," he said wryly. Even if Randy wasn't really equipped with a pleasing personality, he was at least straightforward. Zen would choose the Lord over the Crown Prince any day. A shrewd ally could never be regarded as a true ally after all. And that was how Zen found himself standing in front of Randy's mansion with Francis in tow. The mansion was located south of Crane City. It was extraordinarily grandiose with rich architecture, luxurious amenities, and a refined scenery. As soon as they entered, 4 life and death realm masters quickly surrounded them. They all looked rather nervous as they rushed towards Randy. "Your Highness, where did you go? We were looking all over for you." Randy rolled his eyes. "Why, do I need to keep you updated every minute of every day about my whereabouts?" No, Your Highness, you don't," one of the life and death realm masters replied, immediately bowing his head. Randy snorted and walked past them. Just as they were about to follow him, Randy sent them a glare that froze them in their steps. "Stop right there. The 4 of you should stay here and guard the door. A life and death realm warrior, though not rare in the Divine Kingdom, couldn't just be reduced to a mere doorkeeper." "What?" Randy raised an eyebrow. "Are you not going to do as I say?" Sensing the anger that was boiling through Randy's blood, the 4 life and death realm warriors hurriedly retreated and took their places by the mansion's entrance. Randy gave Zen a meaningful look. "Isn't it quite ridiculous?" he chuckled. Zen frowned. "These people, all the guards and servants in my mansion, they're all my brother's people," Randy told him. At that moment, a beautiful woman entered the threshold. The woman had a virtual tribulation realm cultivation base, was good-looking, well-dressed, and looked like the perfect match for a warrior. Someone like her no doubt had the ability to make any man fall in love with her. She smiled when she saw Randy and hurried towards him. "You're back. Don't you dare come near me," Randy shouted, not even giving her the chance to finish her words. His reaction made her freeze. "Why, Your Highness," she mumbled as hot tears began to roll down her cheeks. "What are you standing there for? I asked you to go away, didn't I?" he coldly reprimanded. The woman's lips trembled, but, under his command, she slowly retreated and disappeared from the Lord's view. "That woman is also under my brother's control," Randy said sadly. Even she was arranged by the Crown Prince. This truly rendered Zen speechless. Outside, Randy was an object of envy for the ordinary folk. He was strong, talented, and greatly honored by the entire Divine Kingdom. However, none of them knew how much of a prisoner he actually was in his own home. Zen could now understand why he treated the Crown Prince like that earlier. It seemed the grudge between the two brothers truly ran deep. The enmity between the two brothers wasn't a secret. The entire Divine Kingdom practically knew about it, and even Francis was aware of this matter. Randy was simply too outstanding, and that was his biggest crime against his brother. His power threatened the Crown Prince's claim to the throne, and when it came to the throne, the Crown Prince would not tolerate any kind of competition, familial ties be darned. The Crown Prince couldn't really take action against Randy because of their father. However, he could still restrain his brother's actions and make him suffer through other methods. And perhaps he had used the cruelest method of all, make his brother live inside a beautiful, hollow prison where he had no one he could trust. Of course, it did not just stop there. There was also that matter of entering the secret lands of the Feather Holy See. Randy knew he would need to gather warriors to form his own team. He couldn't just go there on his own. The Crown Prince had offered his help to find people for him, but Randy naturally rejected since he knew his brother's real intentions. The problem, however, was that besides the Crown Prince, there was really no one else he could turn to. All the young, talented masters were already in the Crown Prince's faction, while the virtual Tribulation Realm warriors that remained weren't that powerful. Randy had managed to invite a handful of warriors who would be able to enter the second tier, but they were still not enough. His meager force could never hope to contend against his brother. When he met Zen, Randy had already made up his mind to fight him. Under the guidance of the Jade Martial House's master, he had managed to restrain himself with the hopes that this young man would be of great help to him. At last, they were finally able to enter the main hall. Francis remained at the door while both Zen and Randy were served tea by the servants. As soon as the tea was poured, Randy immediately chased them out. He looked up at Zen and stared at him with sparkling eyes. "Why do you want to enter the Feather Holy See?" he asked. "I think I can work with you." Chapter 772, Corpses. Randy was talking to Zen in a really polite way. As a superior lord who hailed from a royal family, he had never lowered himself to cooperate with others before. Zen was the only exception. Although the Crown Prince had won over divine-level talents like Gregory and Edwin, along with the other talents from the two major martial houses, they weren't that friendly to one another. They could only be regarded as the Crown Prince's followers. Any powerful prince only wanted to train their own followers. But for Randy, he wanted to work with Zen. When Zen heard Randy's words, his eyes were filled up with surprise. He lightly sipped his tea and looked at the scenery outside the palace. It was quite a sight, so he couldn't help but allow his thoughts to wander. The moment he came to the four divine kingdoms, he didn't plan to depend on any of the forces. However, if someone chose to cooperate with him, he wasn't to refuse. After all, both sides could benefit from it. Despite Randy's indisputable arrogance and conceitedness, he was still an honest man in Zen's eyes. Besides, he was a prince of the Harlan Divine Kingdom. Zen refused to be anyone's follower, but it was undoubtedly very suitable to act jointly with Randy. The only hindrance was the dispute between Randy and the Crown Prince, but that wasn't Zen's concern at that point in time. He wasn't going to stay in the four divine kingdoms for long anyway. Upon noticing Zen's hesitance, Randy spoke, "It looks like you still fear my brother. Am I right?" Initially, Zen's response was to roll his eyes at Randy's straightforwardness. He smiled and said, "I choose to work side by side with you. I'm here for the life stones in the Feather Emperor's secret land." It was no secret that Zen was looking for the life stones, so there was no harm in telling Randy. "Oh, the life stones." There was a meaningful smile plastered on Randy's face. "Why didn't you just say so earlier?" Zen's heart skipped a few beats as he heard Randy's words. He had traveled for miles on end just to find those things. If he could get them from Randy, then it could save him a great deal. In one clap of his hands, a servant girl made her way to Randy in small strides. "Bring me the life stones," Randy said softly, his voice almost sounded like a whisper. After the servant girl received Randy's order, she bowed her head slowly and then exited the room carefully. There was burning excitement that was brewing inside of Zen's heart. It was too extreme that he couldn't conceal it himself. If Randy possessed the life stones, he was willing to pay any price in exchange for them. The expression on Zen's face brought a smile on Randy's face. "It seems that the life stones are of utmost importance to you. You want to save someone, right?" Life stones could replenish a human's life force. However, life force wasn't the same as lifespan. It was completely different from the pills that could increase one's lifespan. Since he was quite young and only in his 20s, Randy had concluded that it wasn't him who needed such. "You're right," Zen nodded as he replied. After the two of them waited for a while, the servant girl returned with a wooden tray which was covered with a layer of silk. Randy slowly stood up and reached out to grab the hem of the silk. He lightly pulled on it, revealing the stones placed delicately on the wooden tray. The stones were the same ancient jade pieces that Zen had seen before. A pure aura of life channeled through the stones. Anyone who went near them could feel the energy of life that they effused. Back then, Zen was worried. He knew very well that Francis, whom he enslaved, didn't dare to deceive him. But what if what Francis said was wrong? What if the life stones were not produced in the four divine kingdoms? Now, he was 100% sure. Unfortunately, the number of life stones on the wooden tray was still not enough. There were only 12 of them in total. Zen also remembered that there was only a small amount of life force in one life stone. The life and death wind that hit Letitia took her life force out of her. 12 of them were far from enough. Seeing a streak of regret in Zen's eyes, Randy instantly knew what was on his mind. He chuckled and said, "We seldom keep life stones at home. These are all I have. They're not enough, I reckon." "I don't mind." Zen shook his head and continued, "It's just that I need a lot more than these. Lord Randy, are you willing to sell them to me for a price?" With him were a bunch of supreme life vitality crystals. He was confident that he could afford to pay for the precious life stones. "There won't be any negotiation. As long as you agree to work with me all the way, consider these life stones as my gift to you. Randy was as straightforward as always. There was no way Zen could refuse such an offer. He could see Randy's nature. If he really wanted to pay for the life stones instead, then it could cause a bicker between him and Randy. Even though the life stones were small in number, each one of them was essential. With one sweep of the hand, Zen collected the life stones from the tray into his space ring. Randy then said, "Since you need more life stones, you must enter the Feather Emperor's secret land to mine ores. With your strength, you shall get in easily, but the mining process can exhaust you to the greatest extent." Mining. Were life stones dug out from the secret land? Zen obviously didn't know much about the Feather Emperor's secret land. Neither did Francis. Even though Francis himself was a life and death realm master and had a high cultivation level, he didn't meet the qualifications to enter the Feather Holy See when he reached the virtual tribulation realm. There was an obvious grin on Randy's face. The 4 divine kingdoms keep the information regarding the Feather Holy See a secret. Like you, most people don't know much about the 4 secret lands. The Feather Emperor, Divine Emperor, Mysterious Dream, and the Heavenly Stellar secret lands are all different from each other. The Feather Emperor's secret land is actually a vein. A vein? You mean a vein that produces life stones? Zen asked, his curiosity at its peak. However, Randy shook his head. The vein within the Feather Emperor's secret land is very rare and the treasures it produces are also very strange. It was once unearthed by the dragon lineage human for tens of thousands of years. Even the 4 divine kingdoms had their fair share of digging for a long time, but the mineral deposits are still very rich. Besides the life stones, it can also produce other beneficial items. With such a vein, the 4 divine kingdoms never wasted any time and went on with mining. I see. Zen nodded. I wonder what the other 2 secret lands have. The Divine Emperor's secret land actually serves as a cemetery. Buried there are the corpses of many dead members of the dragon lineage human. Those bodies have been preserved using a secret technique, so they will not rot for 10,000 years. Cemetery. Zen frowned. Then why is it referred to as a secret land? What treasures are hidden beneath it? There's nothing, Randy replied. Nothing but corpses. It really is just a cemetery. What kind of stuff could you acquire from that sort of place? But, as that was revealed to Zen, he wanted to know if exploring the place could reward him in some way. Before Zen could even finish his words, Randy began to laugh. But the corpses inside are the most precious treasures. Corpses were treasures. Zen was confused all the more. The Feather Holy See was the gathering place of the dragon lineage human. Many of them were killed in the blood sacrifice, so it had become a dangerous place for anyone. There was a long period of time when the 4 divine kingdoms were unable to enter the Feather Holy See. At some point, the Feather Holy See was considered more oppressive and powerful than the cursed land in the entire Sea God continent. At the very least, living beings under the level of war sages could enter the cursed land, but it wasn't the same for the Feather Holy See. However, no matter how dangerous the place was, there was still a way to break it. The legacy left behind by the dragon lineage human was like fat meat in the eyes of the 4 divine kingdoms. How could they sleep soundly when they knew there was fat meat at their doorsteps? After searching again and again, they finally found a way to enter the Feather Emperor, the Divine Emperor, and the Mysterious Dream secret lands. The 4 divine kingdoms had gained so much from those secret lands. Finally, their eyes fell onto the last one, the Heavenly Stellar secret land. The Heavenly Stellar secret land was the core of the dragon lineage human, which was more impossible to enter compared to the first 3 secret lands. It had puzzled the 4 divine kingdoms for countless years. In order to explore it, countless martial artists in the 4 divine kingdoms had given their lives. Among them were many Soul Sea Realm masters. Finally, the 4 divine kingdoms compromised. They found themselves unable to enter all. The power of blood sacrifice within the Heavenly Stellar secret land was not something that they could just brush off their shoulders. Thus, they shifted their focus onto the corpses in the Divine Emperor's secret land. Chapter 773, Trust. Both the Feather Emperor's secret land and the Divine Emperor's secret land were extremely dangerous areas for martial artists. However, they were nothing compared to the Heavenly Stellar secret land. In the Feather Emperor's secret land, as long as one followed the rules of mining and had the expertise, there wouldn't be any major problems. However, the Heavenly Stellar secret land was a land of corruption. Apart from the dragon lineage human, no other living beings were allowed to enter. The 4 divine kingdoms had discussed this predicament together countless times. In the end, they were able to come up with an alternative method. They would use the corpses in the Divine Emperor's secret land. Corpses of dragon lineage human were preserved within Divine Emperor's secret land. Many of them had been preserved using secret techniques, allowing them to withstand the ravages of time. If they occupied these corpses and entered the heavenly stellar secret land, they would not be rejected by the blood sacrifice inside. But even then, the 4 divine kingdoms were still in the most rudimentary stages of developing the heavenly stellar secret land. Plus it wasn't easy to obtain these corpses from the Divine Emperor's secret land, and even when they did get them, there were many restrictions. Zen got a general understanding of these secret lands from Randy. The 4 lands were originally complementary to each other, and the Feather Holy Sea was home to the dragon lineage human. However, there were many limitations to exploring this place. Zen knew that he definitely couldn't rush into heavenly stellar secret land. The 4 divine kingdoms had spent so many years trying to enter it, and things weren't easy for them even after they had gotten in. So obtaining the life stones and the ancestral dragon egg didn't seem like an easy task. Even without the obstruction of the powerful warriors of the Soul Sea realm or the experts of the life and death realm, it wouldn't have been easy for Zen to enter that place anyway. The collaboration with Randy seemed to be inevitable. After I obtain the Harlan token, I will form a team and enter the Feather Holy Sea. Since you want to excavate the life stones, you must also help me, Randy smiled. However, he was afraid that Zen wouldn't stay. Even though he was a lord and was bestowed many rewards every year, he was nothing compared to the crown prince, who was the future emperor. The difference between the two was great. It was possible that Zen's need would motivate him to agree. But Randy didn't have much of a relationship with him. On the contrary, he had had enmity with him before. The only thing that he could use to convince Zen was his sincerity. Randy was an extremely intelligent person. Therefore, when he spoke to Zen, he did not hide anything. Every word he said was heartfelt. Now that he and Zen had the same goals, he naturally had to go with the flow and pull Zen into his team. In this aspect, he had done well. Zen had always been very wary of people from the divine kingdoms, but because of Randy's straightforward nature, he was willing to follow him to his mansion. No problem, Zen smiled and nodded. Great, Randy clapped his hands and yelled, bring some wine. Immediately, fine wine and delicious food were placed in front of them. This wine was as thick as blood, and it didn't smell like alcohol at all. Instead, it had an extremely pleasing scent. Seeing the hesitation on Zen's face, Randy smiled and said, this is my Harlan Divine Kingdom's intoxicating fragrance. Despite our cultivation, we can get drunk. Ordinary wine no longer had any effect on a martial artist's body. It was like water to them, they couldn't get drunk no matter how much alcohol they consumed. To dispel Zen's doubts, Randy poured the blood-like wine into his mouth, turned over the jade cup, and smiled. Zen smiled back and raised his glass, too, gulping it down in one sip. He was curious about the wine. It would be incredibly hard to kill him thanks to his strong immunity. After that, they began to talk merrily and drink heartily. After a few pots of the intoxicating fragrance, the two of them were indeed a little drunk. Suddenly Randy said to the servant girl, go get the princess. The servant girl hesitated before replying, Lord Randy, I'm afraid the princess has already gone to sleep. Then wake her up, Randy roared. Seeing that the lord had lost his temper, the servant didn't dare to delay any longer. Nodding her head nervously, she retreated. Zen was baffled. Why was Randy calling his woman over? Seeing the look in Zen's eyes, Randy laughed mischievously. He grabbed a luminous wine cup with both hands and waved it at Zen before finishing it in one gulp. There is a saying in our Harlan Divine Kingdom that if you could see Hester dancing, you would be willing to give up at least 100 years of your life. She is the most beautiful woman in our kingdom. You'll be amazed, said the tipsy lord. Isn't that inappropriate? Zen couldn't help but roll his eyes. He was speechless. He really didn't know what was going on with Randy. Why was he suddenly asking his wife to dance for them? No matter what, she was still his concubine. How could he insult her like this? There's nothing wrong in that. Randy waved his hand. I'm happy today. But his words made Zen feel even more uncomfortable. Randy had told him that Hester was the crown prince's snitch. As a lord, even his wife wasn't on his side. Zen thought he must be miserable. Still, he thought it was wrong to humiliate her like this. In no time at all, a young woman walked in angrily with a few servants in tow. Randy waved her over and said, Hester, perform for us. Sing and dance. A furious Hester had stomped over. She wouldn't allow her husband to degrade her like this. Her face was red with anger. She wouldn't comply. Born into a famous family and being so beautiful, she was well known in the Harlan Divine Kingdom. Despite that, she had been forced to marry Randy because of an arrangement with the crown prince. They had been married for more than a year, but they didn't love each other. At the end of the day, she was still the crown prince's woman. So far, her marriage with Randy was just a show. Her entire family's fate was in the crown prince's hands, so she would only listen to him. As per the crown prince's orders, she was to report to him about Randy's activities from time to time. Randy, too, was aware of this fact. The entire mansion was full of the crown prince's spies, and everything was handled solely by him. To put it bluntly, the crown prince felt that Randy was too much of a threat and he wanted to imprison him. Randy was also wary of her and she knew it too. But she couldn't stand such humiliation. She was enraged right now. She refused to comply and this made the Lord furious. An extremely sharp killing intent was released, which immediately enveloped her. "Dance or die," said Randy, glaring at her. Hester's heart trembled under this gaze. If the Lord decided to kill her, no one would be able to plead with him. Helpless, she gritted her teeth and agreed. As the musicians played the music, this woman danced in front of Zen and Randy. When he saw the reluctance and hatred in her eyes, Zen sighed. However, this was a royal family matter, so he couldn't interfere. He realized why Randy was humiliating Hester by making her dance in front of a stranger. He hated the people in his mansion, including his wife. They all worked for the crown prince. It was unbearable, so he needed to vent his anger. But he also wanted to earn Zen's trust. However, the Lord was too young and immature. He was not even 20 years old. He only wanted to achieve his own goals without thinking about the consequences of his actions. His own wife dancing for his guest would be a disgrace to himself. It was ridiculous. Unfortunately, the Lord didn't care about this. On the contrary, it made Zen extremely uncomfortable, like he was sitting on a bed of nails. Chapter 774, The Team. Hester danced gracefully like a nightingale, but how could Zen be in the mood to appreciate it under such a strange atmosphere? Lord Randy was glaring down at Hester with a manic expression on his face. It was as though tormenting his wife was quite a pleasant way of venting his anger. So when the song was over, Zen quickly stood up from his seat and found a possible excuse to leave. He was apparently not interested in how Lord Randy was to compete with the crown prince. What he only wanted was to follow the goals he had set for himself. He was already pleased that he had obtained some life stones from Lord Randy's manor, although the quantity was far from enough. Apart from that, he now had a clearer understanding of the Feather Holy See. And with him being more determined to enter the Feather Holy See, he wouldn't waste time while he was waiting for that to happen. Aside from his planned cultivation, he also wanted to purchase more life stones. Anyway, Crane City was the second largest city in the Harlan Divine Kingdom. And within this city, the Jade Marshall House was considered a perfect place for cultivation, which was comparable to a 6th grade sect. There were no sects in the Divine Kingdoms, but there were many large clans instead. Back in the central region, 3rd grade clans were considered the strongest. And there had never been a 4th grade clan. In the Crane City, however, there were quite a few 4th grade large clans, and even several 5th grade clans. The masters of those clans were generally at the 4th or even at the 5th level of the life and death realm. Since Lord Randy's mansion possessed life stones, Zen believed that he could get more of these stones from those large clans in the Crane City. If they were willing to exchange those stones with life vitality crystals, he wouldn't hesitate to make the deal. So once he was done with his daily cultivation, he spent all his spare time inquiring about the life stones. However, the result was quite disappointing. The life stones could replenish one's life energy, so they were an irresistible temptation for every warrior. They were a must-have for everyone. When they were fortunate to obtain it, most of these people would instantly consume their life stone, so there were rarely any reserves of these precious life stones. With the said scarcity, Zen had to stop thinking about purchasing life stones. He could only wait for the exploration of the Feather Holy See. He had no final say on when he would go to that place because only the 4 divine kingdoms had the rights to allow warriors to enter the Feather Holy See. Half a month later, Lord Randy suddenly paid a visit to Zen. Without even bothering to exchange pleasantries, he commanded directly, "Come and follow me. I'll introduce my teammates to you." "Your teammates?" Zen was curious. He didn't ask further and just followed Lord Randy straight to the Jade Marshall House. The Jade Marshall House occupied a wide area. There were countless pavilions and halls around the place. The other warriors they met as they passed by were very respectful when they saw Lord Randy. They all bowed and silently made way for him. Soon after, they finally arrived at a pavilion inside the Marshall House. There were 2 men and 1 woman waiting for them to come in. All of them were at the late stage of the virtual tribulation realm. Zen casually glanced through them and sensed that they all had powerful strengths. So he assumed and considered them as divine-level talents. As soon as Lord Randy entered the pavilion, those three warriors simultaneously opened their eyes from their meditations. The woman sitting at one side was about 20 years old. Smiling sweetly, she addressed the Lord, "You're finally here, sweet little Randy." Sweet little Randy. Zen was taken aback. He couldn't understand why she called Lord Randy that. Lord Randy pretended to be angry as he said, "I've told you many times. Don't call me that. Our sweet little Randy looks even cuter when he gets angry." The woman, however, wasn't alarmed at all. She still had the same smile on her face. It was self-evident that she had a lively personality. The other two men both admonished her, "Camilla, don't be so rude to Lord Randy." Ignoring their advice, the girl called Camilla turned her gaze towards Zen. Her round, beautiful eyes stopped at him as she asked, "Sweet little Randy, who is this guy?" Lord Randy smiled and patted Zen's shoulder as he replied, "Let me introduce him to you. This is Thad, he will temporarily join us." He then faced Zen, "Thad, they are all members of my team. They are Camilla, Renzo, and Barry. Then including both of us, we now form a team of 5. There was no specific limit to the number of people exploring the Feather Holy Sea. But after scouting it for so many years, the warriors from 4 divine kingdoms gradually optimized their team size. Based on previous experience, the best strategy to explore the Feather Holy Sea was to form small teams that were comprised of 5 warriors. And every year, each divine kingdom would send many teams of such size to tour the area. Both Lord Randy and the Crown Prince were secretly forming their own teams. However, compared to the Crown Prince, Lord Randy was obviously at a disadvantage, and it was quite a distinct one. Randy's talent and strength were probably on par with that of the Crown Prince. But his original 3 teammates were incomparable to Gregory and Edwin under the Crown Prince. That was the main reason why Randy wanted Zen to join his team. "We form a team of 5. With him." "Randy, are you serious?" Camilla asked, her eyes staring at Zen with disdain. Not only these 3 were all from the 5th grade clans in the Crane City, but also they were all top-level members of their clans. Even though their strengths were inferior to that of Gregory, they still ranked top of the 2nd-tier warriors of the Jade Martial House. After they were selected by Randy, they didn't even have to participate in the test. They also all secured Harlan tokens through his help. During this period, they usually gathered together to train their teamwork, preparing to set off for the Feather Holy Sea. But now, Randy suddenly brought a cultivator at the middle level of the virtual tribulation realm to join them. They were all completely at a loss as to why he wanted to do so. There were many warriors at the late stage of the virtual tribulation realm in the Jade Martial House. Even if Randy wanted a stopgap or a stand-in, it should never be this guy in front of them. Hearing Camilla's words, Randy of course understood her meaning. It was clear that she looked down on Zen's low cultivation base. "Thad, please do not take offense at it." Randy was afraid that Zen would get angry. Camilla, on the other hand, rolled her eyes and pointed out, "What's there to be worried about? Being able to attract your attention and join us is already his fortune. But Randy, I still don't understand why you want to recruit such a burden." Randy smiled, "That is not a burden. If I am not mistaken, he might be the mainstay of our team." Renzo's and Barry's expressions immediately changed as they glanced at each other when they heard Randy's words. Even though their characters weren't as lively as Camilla, they also had some pride in being able to work with Lord Randy. Due to their exceptional talents, they were always the 1 in a million. Zen's cultivation base was only at the middle stage of the virtual tribulation realm. He was a nobody in their eyes. But since Randy was regarding him in such high praise, then it only meant that he was not so weak as he looked like. The mainstay of their team. Randy was always the one they regarded as the mainstay of their team. They pondered over Randy's words and wondered, is it possible that this Thad is more powerful than Lord Randy? Camilla scoffed as she looked at Zen with a provocative gaze and grumbled, "I don't believe it. Sweet little Randy, you are making fun of us for nothing." "You really think so?" Randy knew that if Zen didn't show his real strength, it would be difficult to convince them. "If you think I'm making fun of you, you can spar with that and get your answer." As soon as Randy finished speaking, they all stared at Zen with keen interest. It was apparent that they all wanted to challenge him. A trace of helplessness was revealed on Zen's face. "There's no need for this, is there? You are not the one to decide." As soon as Camilla let out those words, she suddenly charged at him as she extended her slender hand to slap him. The moment she moved, thousands of hands suddenly appeared in Zen's eyes, and she was like the thousand-hand bodhisattva. In the blink of an eye, she had slapped over 1,000 times, blocking all of his escape routes. She is unreasonably fast. Zen's eyes beamed with surprise. He unexpectedly discovered that there was a special law power that had erupted from this woman's body. He had never seen this kind of law power before. Time law. He knew that the two most powerful laws in this universe were the time law and the space law. He had grasped and mastered the space law, but he had never seen anyone seizing the time law. He never expected that he would see it from this woman called Camilla. And it was all because of the effect of the time law that this woman was able to attack him so many times in a span of a blink of an eye. Camilla, Lord Randy only allows you to spar with him. Don't hurt him severely, the warrior called Renzo warned from the side. Knowing Camilla, who habitually lacked a sense of propriety, Renzo was afraid that she might get blamed by Randy if she heavily injured Zen, who was only at the middle stage of the virtual tribulation realm. Randy looked quite calm, as if he wasn't worried about Zen at all. Chapter 775, Cooperation. Camilla smiled as she replied, "Don't worry, I won't hurt him." But just as she finished talking, the palm shadows around Zen became more intense and intimidating by the minute. Her hands were delicate, but she was capable of chopping a bronze statue made of fine iron into pieces. If Zen couldn't think of a way to deal with her, then she would definitely hurt him. A light sparkled and burst out of Zen's eyes as he tried to comprehend the time law that Camilla was using. "It won't help if you don't move. I'm really going to attack," Camilla said with a hint of disdain as she saw Zen staring blankly at her. Who knew what kind of tricks this fellow had used to fool Randy into including him in the team? She used a majority of her strength to hack at Zen. Zen had been comprehending for a long time, but he finally shook his head. He reached out and easily grabbed Camilla's slender hands. He then said softly, "The power of the time law in your strike is too little for me to comprehend." He had caught Camilla's hands so swiftly and easily that it looked like Camilla had just offered them to him to hold instead of trying to attack him. Camilla was dumbstruck for a moment. She wanted to pull her hands back from Zen's, but found that she couldn't. It was as if her hands were clamped down by a pair of large pincers. Renzo and Barry had expected this to be a good show. They wanted to see what kind of method Zen would use to fight against Camilla's attack. Camilla's attack from the thousand lady hands dazzled the people present there as if they had seen countless flower petals falling down. It contained a trace of the time law, which could change the time flow rate in a short period of time. It was next to impossible to break it, only method which was more powerful could do this. But they never expected Zen to break it with a simple move. They looked at each other, exchanging puzzled glances, and they knew that each was more shocked than the other. A faint smile appeared on Randy's face, as if everything was happening according to his will. But there was still a trace of surprise in his smile. He had predicted that Zen would be able to break Camilla's attack, but he hadn't expected it to be so soon, as simply as having a meal or drinking water. It was as if Zen's strength had far exceeded the strength that a virtual tribulation realm warrior should technically have. Only this line of reasoning allowed for the fact that he had demonstrated such an amazing stunt. "You, leave me." Camilla wanted to pull her hands out of Zen's, but after trying several times, she was still unable to do so. She glared at Zen, her eyes almost popping out of their sockets. Her face flushed in anger. Zen then let go of her hands, a smile playing on his face. But before he could say anything, Camilla asked angrily, "What do you mean by the power of the time law is too little? You want to comprehend the time law from me?" Everyone was baffled at this. To start with, it was difficult to comprehend the time law. Moreover, the time law that Camilla had displayed was activated by her own life vitality. The time law activated by life vitality would usually be in a state of chaos, and only someone who had mastered the time law could control it. It would be impossible for Zen to comprehend his opponent's law power during battle, however badly he wanted it. What they didn't know was that Zen had the highest degree of affinity with the law power in the entire universe after withstanding the baptism by laws. It might be difficult for others to comprehend the law power, but not for Zen. The two most powerful laws were the space law and the time law. Zen had already comprehended the space law, but until now, he hadn't experienced the time law. This was the first time that he had ever seen it in action. Zen smiled faintly and said, "Why would I let the chance to comprehend the time law slip by?" "Humph," Camilla snorted coldly, "even I have only comprehended just 10% of the time law. You think it's that easy to comprehend it? It's 10% of the first layer of the time law, right?" Zen asked nonchalantly, not caring if his remarks offended her. Camilla's face swelled with anger and she glared at him, as if she would like nothing better than to kill him. Compared to the other basic laws in the universe, the time law and space law were extremely rare and precious, making it much more difficult to practice them. Zen had learned the first layer of the space law in the genuine dragon world, and the second layer from the talent tablet in the Tower of Sin. It was extremely difficult to find the tablet that carried the inheritance of the space law or the time law in the great world. But the time law that Camilla had cultivated was even more difficult than the space law. Its power was even greater than that of all the other basic laws combined. The time law could enable the cultivator to change the time flow rate, which left much room for the cultivator to bring out his or her best potential and bring the enemy down. Therefore, the fact that Camilla was able to comprehend 10% of the first layer of the time law was enough to make her far superior to the other martial artists at the same level. But Zen, on the other hand, pitied her for having comprehended so little. And his pitying look pissed Camilla off to no end. Randy walked over, grinning. He said, "All right, let's call it a day. Thad's strength should be no less than mine. He will definitely be of great help if he joins our team." Humph. Camilla huffed and puffed, unconvinced. Zen had casually broken her attack by simply reaching out and grabbing her. And with Randy's obvious favor to him, she realized that Zen's strength was at the same level as Gregory's. He was an extraordinary talent who should have been ranked in the first tier. There were countless martial artists in the Harlan Divine Kingdom, but there were only 4 people at the first tier. And right now, Zen's strength was beyond her imagination. Randy said to Zen, "I can tell that you've always been a loner. You don't seem to understand the meaning of teaming up." Randy's words reminded Zen of the Heavenly Evil sect that Eddie had set up. Back then, the Heavenly Evil sect had a special way to combine the life vitality of tens of thousands of illuminating Soul Realm warriors, which made it possible for these low-level warriors to display a power that was terrifying to say the least. Zen nodded at Randy's words. Randy waved at Renzo, Camilla, and Barry, and then walked to the center of the hall to extend a hand to Zen, saying, "You can try to attack me." Renzo and Camilla stood on either side of Randy, while Barry stood behind him. Is Lord Randy trying to join forces with the others and fight alongside them? Zen thought. Zen glanced at the group curiously. Since he had already agreed to join Randy's team, he was supposed to be integrated into it. As he thought this, his figure flashed as he charged towards Randy. Before Zen could even get close, Renzo extended his hand and waves of life vitality which were colored faintly purple surged out of his body and kept circling Randy swiftly and constantly. Camilla smiled. She waved a slender hand and a thin curtain of light appeared immediately. When Zen rushed towards the light curtain, he felt everything around him, including his own speed, slow down. It's the time law, and right now, all 3 of them are in complete support of Lord Randy. Zen thought. Randy's figure flashed suddenly and appeared behind Zen. With a flip of his hand, he had placed a sharp dagger at Zen's neck. It was a combined effort of several people, but it looked like they had done a perfect job. But Zen was swift to react. Camilla's comprehension of the time law wasn't deep, and with a slight twist of his body, he slipped away from Randy's grip like a fish. A cocky, confident smile found its way to his face as he reached out, ready to snatch the dagger from Randy's hand. In that instant, Zen felt a great tremor within his mind, as if an axe with the power to split a mountain apart had slashed through his head. Barry had launched a soul attack on him. Anyone else probably wouldn't have been able to block this soul attack after these multiple attacks. Even if they managed to block it with a lot of effort, they'd probably have become distracted. And how could they block Randy's attack when distracted? But Barry hadn't realized or even imagined that Zen's soul had almost entered the Jasper fighting soul realm. The attack felt more like an itchy spot for Zen than a powerful spirit attack. Zen, however, didn't want to reveal his full strength. He feigned a groan as he leaned forward, once again finding Randy's dagger at his neck. Randy smiled smugly, thinking he had defeated Zen. He wanted to prove to Zen that their combined strength was far greater than Zen's individual strength. Randy hadn't expected that the 4 of them combined would still not be a match for Zen. But since they had only come here to spar, Zen didn't want to reveal too much of his strength. Sweet little Randy, kill him. A proud smile appeared on Camilla's face when she saw that Randy had managed to restrain Zen. It was still obvious that her grudge against Zen hadn't disappeared because of his previous offense. Randy, on the other hand, only wanted to show Zen the power of a team and didn't pay heed to Camilla's words. He smiled as he took the dagger away from Zen's neck. There isn't much time left. Once we enter the Feather Holy Sea, we will face a lot of competition. If you have the time, you can try to practice with Camilla and the others and break in. The 5 of us must obtain the best results on this trip to the secret land. Randy said, his eyes gleaming with great anticipation. The Crown Prince had always suppressed him and he had always looked for an opportunity to turn the situation around. Although the Crown Prince was powerful, he wasn't powerful enough to do everything. If Randy could gain his father's favor, the Crown Prince would definitely restrain himself at Randy's rising influence. Zen nodded. After all, Randy's goal didn't contradict his own. If he could achieve his goal and help Randy at the same time, he would not back out of doing so. Zen stayed in the Jade Marshall house to practice with the other three. He slowly familiarized himself with these three people. Renzo was docile and easygoing while Barry was stiff and not very talkative. Camilla, on the other hand, was always cheerful and carefree. With his increasing understanding of the techniques they practiced, Zen now knew why Randy had chosen the three of them. Neither Renzo, Barry, nor Camilla were good at attacking. It looked like the cultivation techniques that they specialized in were all about auxiliary skills. For example, the time law that Camilla had cultivated was only able to slow down the opponent's speed. When she displayed the time law, the opponent would become incomparably slow for just an instant. And that instant would be enough for the opponent to lose their life. Renzo was adept at creating many obstacles for his opponents. And Barry cultivated a refinement technique that could disturb one's mind. Their path of implementing martial arts was completely different from that in the Central region or even the Sea God continent. In the Central region and the Sea God continent, people attached great importance to individual strength. They rarely cooperated with others. If the warriors at the virtual tribulation realm worked together, the overall effect could be quite overwhelming. But if 5 or 6 powerful masters at the Soul Sea realm collaborated with each other, the result would be unimaginable. An individual master at the Sea God continent, like Amber, was very powerful. But if 5 powerful masters of the Soul Sea realm on the Sea God continent fought against 5 powerful masters of the Soul Sea realm in a divine kingdom, it would be more likely that the masters of the divine kingdom would win. Because they were better at the art of cooperation. In this hall, when Zen cultivated with them, they would occasionally communicate with each other, asking and clarifying each other's doubts about the martial arts. But it was Zen who asked the others for advice most of the time. The inheritances of the divine kingdoms were much richer than those of the Central region. What was more, a considerable part of their inheritances came from the human race of the upper world. Unfortunately, Zen didn't know which force of the upper world's human race their inheritance came from. As time passed, Randy also became busier. Since he was busy with matters of the royal house, he rarely appeared in the martial house. 3 months later, the Jade Martial House had gathered all the martial artists who had passed the test, including Zen. Zen had conjectured that the Jade Martial House had probably gathered them because the Feather Holy Sea was about to open. The Feather Holy Sea was like a treasury of the 4 divine kingdoms, at a similar position as the Dark Nether Cave in the Sea God continent. He didn't know how they were going to send the warriors into the Feather Holy Sea. Camilla, Barry, and Renzo, however, weren't there. They belonged to Randy's forces, so they hadn't participated in the test. They would probably set out with Randy. Chapter 776, Gathering. The Feather Holy Sea was similar to the Cursed Land in that it was also located at the center of a continent. To most martial practitioners, it was also a forbidden area. Still, there was a fundamental difference between the two. The Cursed Land was a forbidden area for high-ranked martial artists, while the Feather Holy Sea was forbidden to the low-ranked martial artists. Every year, the 4 divine kingdoms would join forces to explore the Feather Holy Sea. The sacred place left behind by the dragon lineage human was an inexhaustible trove to them. Apart from the resources in the endless sea around them, the most important part of their development was the secret lands in the Feather Holy Sea. In the eyes of the rulers of the 4 divine kingdoms, the Feather Holy Sea was the most precious treasure of all. All of the selected martial artists of the Jade Martial House boarded a huge ark which was something like a palace in the sky, with hundreds of floors above and below it. It was evidently large enough to accommodate tens of thousands of people. Following the other martial artists who had passed the examination, Zen entered the ark. After it ascended into the sky, it sped off toward the northwest. All of the virtual tribulation realm martial artists were extremely excited about having passed the test. It was no wonder they were ecstatic. Those who were chosen by the 4 divine kingdoms to gain experience in the Feather Holy Sea would eventually become the proud sons of the heavens. It was known that out of the 4 divine kingdoms, 99% of Soul Sea realm masters had achieved good results on their first trip to the Feather Holy Sea. The secret lands were a yardstick for the assessment of potential martial artists in the divine kingdoms. Every martial artist at the virtual tribulation realm tried his best, sparing no effort. Wow, it's so beautiful. I've always heard that the Feather Holy Sea is golden, but this is the first time I've seen it for myself. It's said that the golden light within is the power left behind by the blood sacrifice of billions of lives from the dragon lineage human. Many rushed to the deck of the Ark to admire the sea from high up in the sky. Even Zen stood on the deck, admiring the golden waters. He could feel the power of blood sacrifice within the golden light. The defeat of the dragon lineage human and the sacrifices of billions of lives must have left immense dissatisfaction. Trying to focus his gaze further away in the distance, he couldn't find any traces of the secret lands. Its secret was still enveloped by the ocean. If Zen's guess was right, the 4 secret lands should be 4 islands on the Feather Holy Sea. However, even though the Feather Holy Sea was merely an inland sea, the islands still weren't visible. Patience was something he dearly needed on his way to his destination. These days, he was anxious more often than not. At such times, the anxiety was useless. Although he no longer had a rival in the central region, his strength was not enough to take down the entirety of the 4 divine kingdoms. Although the Ark advanced at an extreme speed, it still took them 2 days and 3 nights to reach their destination. On the morning of the 3rd day, a large river finally appeared before them. It's the West Dragon River. We're at the entrance. One end of the West Dragon River was connected to the Feather Holy Sea. It was a spectacular sight. The golden water from the sea seemed to overflow like wine from a glass. Even though a corner of the Feather Holy Sea was connected to the river, the golden water didn't mix into the river. This section of the water was an azure river. The upstream section suddenly turned golden, and the connection between the two had been extremely abrupt. On the other side of the great river, there were already over 20 giant arks docked. It seemed that the martial artists of the other martial houses had also arrived. The Ark of the Jade Martial House slowly came to a stop. Under the leadership of the 3 Soul Sea Realm Masters, the other Virtual Tribulation Realm martial artists left the Ark. A huge palace lay a few dozen miles to the side of the river. In front of it was a square over 10,000 acres in size, where many martial artists had gathered. So many martial artists from the 4 divine kingdoms, Zen muttered to himself as he saw the area. Apart from the Harlan Divine Kingdom, once the Feather Holy Sea was opened, the York Divine Kingdom, the Wind Divine Kingdom, and the Starfield Divine Kingdom also followed. This was an important day when all of the martial artists from the 4 divine kingdoms could gather together. In the massive square, the younger generation of martial artists occupied their own territories. Many life and death realm powerhouses and Soul Sea realm masters occupied the steps in front of the palace. In a glance, Zen found out that there were over 30 Soul Sea realm masters standing at the top of the stairs. Even though they were quite a distance away from Zen, he could still feel their terrifying auras. The resources in the 4 divine kingdoms are much better than those in the central region. In their eyes, the central region is merely a small, savage land. I've killed 2 Soul Sea realm masters from the York Divine Kingdom. What will they do to me? In truth, what Zen was most worried about was encountering the Holy Maiden of the York Divine Kingdom. Back in Mist's celestial tomb, Zen had to come into conflict with the Holy Maiden. If she was here today, it would be a huge hurdle to overcome. There were countless powerful martial artists in the Soul Sea realm. If Zen was seriously targeted by even one of them, he wouldn't be able to escape. When Zen followed the disciples of the Jade Martial House into the square, they heard a resounding voice from the palace, "Here comes Jade Martial House from the Harlan Divine Kingdom." The voice was extremely sharp, practically spreading throughout the surrounding 100 miles. Together with the other martial artists, Zen entered the huge square. The 3 powerful martial artists of the Soul Sea realm stood on the steps of the palace. The positions of the 3 heads of the Jade Martial House were slightly lower, at the bottom half of the stairs. On the square, many Virtual Tribulation Realm martial artists took up different positions according to their respective kingdoms. For instance, the Jade Martial House and the Dark Martial House both came from the Harlan Divine Kingdom, so their martial artists grouped together. After a while, another huge ark descended from the sky and docked by the river. Soon after, the shrill voice was heard again. "Here comes the Wisteria Martial House from the Starfield Divine Kingdom." From the Ark, another 4 Soul Sea Realm Masters appeared. They slowly flew up the steps of the palace. Compared to the position of the 3 heads of the Jade Martial House, the position occupied by the Wisteria Martial House was several steps higher. Seeing the scene before him, Zen understood what was going on. This continent was occupied by the 4 divine kingdoms, but their status was not equal. Some still got the better. The Harlan Divine Kingdom might not be the strongest among the kingdoms. Although the Jade Martial House was comparable to a 6th grade sect, it was not the most powerful martial house either. The status of the Wisteria Martial House that had just arrived should be above that of the Jade Martial House. With that, Zen was right. The four divine kingdoms had maintained a subtle balance for many years, but there was a clear difference in strength. Over the years, their seating arrangements had frequently changed. In the last 100 years, however, the York Divine Kingdom was the most prosperous, followed by the Starfield Divine Kingdom, the Wind Divine Kingdom, and lastly, the Harlan Divine Kingdom. The ranking was based only on a kingdom's power and the combined performance of its younger generation. The leaders of divine kingdoms were war emperors with lives spanning several tens of thousands of years. Under normal circumstances, there wouldn't be any battles among them, so it was difficult to distinguish who was stronger. Considering that, the official ranking didn't mean that the Harlan Divine Kingdom was weaker than the York Divine Kingdom. Here comes the Spirit Martial House from the Wind Divine Kingdom. Here comes the Cloud Dragon Martial House from the York Divine Kingdom. Every martial house had at least a 5th grade sect strength. The population of the Soul Sea Realm Masters on the steps kept increasing, and more virtual Tribulation Realm martial artists arrived at the square. At that moment, Zen suddenly felt a light bloom in the corner of his eyes. Looking up, he saw a light appear in the west. Like a small sun, it quickly rose in the air. As the light got closer, Zen could see that it was a golden palace. The dazzling place flew over at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, it was right by the West Dragon River. Then, deep laughter was heard from within the palace. "Ha ha, looks like I came too early. The other elders haven't arrived yet." Immediately after, Zen saw hundreds of figures fly out of the Golden Palace. A middle-aged man with a flushed face was in the lead. In a mere glance, Zen could feel an irresistible aura from the man. It couldn't be released by soul pressure. It was unique to superior men who had occupied high-ranking positions for a very long time. Even Amber of the Heavenly Feather Sacred Place didn't have such an aura. After all, she had only ruled the place for over 200 years. Zen had only felt it from Lavender. And of course, Lavender's aura was still even sharper than this person's. His aura was aimed only at the human martial artists, while Lavender's could overwhelm almost all living beings. "Here comes Scott, the head of the Starfield Divine Kingdom." The sharp sound reverberated again. "So he's the ruler of the Starfield Divine Kingdom. The 4 divine kingdoms are the rulers of this continent. His strength must be at least in the top 4 here," Zen guessed inwardly. Scott merely laughed. Instead of flying up to the palace as the others did, he stayed above the square for a moment, glancing at the many virtual Tribulation Realm martial artists on the square. "Where are the people of my Starfield Divine Kingdom?" When they heard their ruler's question, the martial artists, including those from the Wisteria Martial House and other martial houses from the Starfield Divine Kingdom, responded like thunder, "Greetings, my king. Here we are." As hundreds of virtual Tribulation Realm martial artists roared all at once, the very ground seemed to tremble. Chapter 777, War Kings and War Emperors. "Ha ha, warriors of the Starfield Divine Kingdom, I can't wait to see your performances." Scott cheered exuberantly. As the Emperor of the Starfield Divine Kingdom, he led the warriors behind him to stand on the highest platform. Among those following him were warriors at both the life and death and virtual tribulation realms. In all likelihood, they were the princes and princesses of the Starfield Divine Kingdom. After Scott had arrived, a bright blue stream of light appeared from not too far away. It went down like a comet, dragging a long trail as it emerged. When the light approached closer, Zen discovered that it was a grand sword that had been magnified countless times. "The Emperor of the York Divine Kingdom has arrived." Some people were able to identify the great sword's origin. As expected, when the huge sword stopped at the riverbank, some powerful warriors at the Soul Sea Realm showed up, followed by hundreds more. The same sharp voice announced again, "War Emperor York of the York Divine Kingdom has arrived." Compared to Scott of the Starfield Divine Kingdom, War Emperor York's personality was a bit more dismal. He flew through the square without a word and brought his men directly to the platform. As Zen took a closer look, he saw a woman with a veil covering her face right behind War Emperor York. His eyebrows twitched slightly, and he shrunk back into the crowd. That woman was none other than the Holy Maiden of the York Divine Kingdom. At that time, Zen had no idea about the current standing of the Holy Maiden in their Divine Kingdom. If she happened to recognize him, was it possible that the powerful warriors at the Soul Sea Realm of the York Divine Kingdom could come after him? Both Scott and War Emperor York were at the Soul Sea Realm. There was a gap in terms of strength among warriors at the Soul Sea Realm. With Zen's current strength, it was impossible for him to escape those two emperors. If the Holy Maiden saw him, was War Emperor York to attack him too? All the thoughts that were running in his head began to make him feel anxious. Quickly, he took a deep breath and tried his best to calm down. He believed in his luck. He had been through so much, so he knew he was also going to survive more obstacles that came his way. The emperors of the Wind and Harlan divine kingdoms all arrived. They were War King Wind and Turner Joe respectively. The titles of the 4 emperors were indeed confusing. It wasn't strange for other warriors, but Zen thought it was quite strange. When warriors reached the Soul Sea realm, they had the chance to be kings and emperors. Some of them kept their names while the others chose to name themselves War King or War Emperor. The Crown Prince followed on a wheelchair. Lord Randy was also among the warriors standing behind Turner Joe. On the platform were many powerful warriors at the Soul Sea realm as well as the imperial members of the 4 divine kingdoms. On the square below were the elites of the younger generation of the 4 divine kingdoms. When almost everyone was already in the area, that same voice rang out once again. Everyone from the 4 divine kingdoms is already here. According to the customs, a competition will be held first, and then we will offer sacrifices to the great ancestors. When he arrived at the entrance of the Feather Holy Sea at that time, Zen also understood how the 4 divine kingdoms explored that place every year. The 4 divine kingdoms looked at the Feather Holy Sea like it was a giant cake. Every year, each divine kingdom divided the cake. Whoever got the first slice or the bigger one could be decided through certain methods. Hundreds of years ago, the 4 emperors relied on arguments to the point of physical duels in order to come up with a decision. The fights that went down among those war kings and war emperors were groundbreaking. Because the 4 divine kingdoms had the same origins, they wanted to have a harmonious relationship with each other as much as possible. Thus, before offering sacrifices to the ancestors, the top warriors of the younger generation of the 4 divine kingdoms had to fight against each other first. That way, they could examine the strength of the young warriors and finally decide. As time passed, the 4 divine kingdoms considered those battles of the utmost importance. There were warriors who even discussed predictions of the outcome as well as the strength of the participants. The 4 emperors were standing on the highest platform. Scott laughed at the situation that unfolded before him. Everyone around him was so pumped. Then, he announced, "Warriors of the Starfield Divine Kingdom, please come forth." As there were 3 6th grade martial houses in the Starfield Divine Kingdom, 6 warriors could be ranked in the first tier. When Scott had finished speaking, a warrior rushed out of the square in a flash towards the bottom of the platform to take a bow. "Your Majesty, I, Titus Zhao, am representing the Wisteria Martial House." Being the Emperor of the Starfield Divine Kingdom, Scott naturally had a good knowledge of the young warriors of theirs. He seemed to be quite confident of Titus Zhao. Smiling proudly, he said, "Good. Today, you shall fight. Now, who wants to challenge this young man?" As soon as Scott finished speaking, a beam of light flashed. It was another warrior who charged his way to the foot of the platform. He was from the York Divine Kingdom and looked rather well built and was quite tall. "I, Logan Yun from Shadow Martial House of York Divine Kingdom, would like to challenge you." A faint smile appeared on War Emperor York's face. Finally, one of theirs appeared. "Logan, you are said to be invincible among the warriors at the Virtual Tribulation Realm. I believe you won't let me down this time," he encouraged. "I'm afraid my invincibility is only just a rumor, Your Majesty," Logan Yun humbly replied. Despite such a statement, it was evident that his confidence was strong, almost as if he didn't care that much about the warriors at the Virtual Tribulation Realm that were present on the square. Since 2 warriors had already volunteered, the battle commenced. Once the sparring began, the crowd roared. Warriors at the Virtual Tribulation Realm were extremely strong, and nothing stopped them from showing everyone the depths of their strength and abilities. If they could, they would move mountains and overturn seas just so they could let everyone know how much they shouldn't be messed with. 2 warriors at the Soul Sea realm on the platform walked down the stairs to wave their hands until they created thin lines that later on formed the enchanted barrier that surrounded the square. The space inside the enchanted barrier was where the battle took place. The enchanted barrier created by warriors at the Soul Sea realm wasn't just something that could be broken by any warrior at the Virtual Tribulation realm. Thinking that those fights didn't have much to do with him, Zen didn't pay that much attention. After all, he wasn't from any of the 4 divine kingdoms. What he was more concerned about was entering the Feather Holy Sea. However, he had no other choice at that time but be patient until a victor was announced. According to Zen's estimation, that battle wasn't going to last very long. There were only 4 warriors in the Harlan Divine Kingdom that could be ranked in the first tier. Soon, the warriors who were to represent the entire Harlan Divine Kingdom would only be 4 people: the Crown Prince, Lord Randy, Edwin, and Gregory. Even if the Starfield and York Divine Kingdoms were slightly stronger than the Harlan Divine Kingdom, the number of warriors that could be ranked in the first tier wasn't too many. At most, there could only be around 6 or 7 from each of the 2 Divine Kingdoms. On the square, many warriors at the virtual tribulation realm were anxiously watching the battle within the enchanted barrier. The sense of belonging that the warriors of the 4 Divine Kingdoms felt was far greater than that of the disciples of the sects in the central region. Warriors that were born in the Divine Kingdoms paid more attention to the glory of their respective Divine Kingdoms. That battle was a showdown between warriors of 2 different Divine Kingdoms. Naturally, the other warriors from the same kingdoms who were watching were both nervous and concerned. As for the warriors of the Harlan and Wind Divine Kingdoms, they just watched from the sidelines. Boom! Tongues of flames filled the arena. The moment the 2 warriors entered the fighting square, the atmosphere had turned fiercely hot. It was every young warrior's dream to represent their own divine kingdoms, and not one of them intended on losing the battle. For most of them, it was all or nothing. So Logan Yun is considered an invincible warrior at the virtual tribulation realm, Warriors at the York Divine Kingdom are nothing but a bunch of boastful losers. I agree with you. Titus is going to kill him. He's definitely not a match for Titus. The warriors who were discussing were both from the Wisteria martial house and could be Titus Zhao's friends. However, a warrior from the York Divine Kingdom refused to be looked down upon. We'll see about that. It will only take a little time before Logan beats your Titus to a pulp. What did you just say? Will you believe me if I also told you that I can beat you to a pulp right here, right now? As soon as the fight began, the entire square was filled with an extremely loud uproar. The warriors from the Divine Kingdoms who had representatives on the current duel were all excited, as if all of them were ready to fight at any given moment, too. Witnessing the craze, Zen only shook his head and allowed a smile to play on his face. Even if those warriors were already at the virtual tribulation realm, they still acted like kids. In comparison, the warriors at the virtual tribulation realm in the central region and the warlords on the Sea God continent seemed much more mature. The more he looked at the situation, the more Zen understood. All those virtual tribulation realm warriors grew up in martial houses. Fighting was a way of life for them. They were elites among elites. Most of the warriors at the virtual tribulation realm in the central region were over 100 years old, while those from the Divine Kingdoms were much younger. As for the warlords on the Sea God continent, they had experienced many trials and tribulations in the Tower of Sin. Their personalities had been hardened by life and death crises, so they were naturally not so naive or easily angered. That event happened about once each year. The warriors at the Soul Sea realm didn't care much about the ongoing banter. Their focus was solely on the fight that was happening midair. Titus Zhao had cultivated a polished fire system cultivation method. In addition, he also seemed to have grasped the 3rd layer of the fire law. Within those flames, extreme power of annihilation was contained. As he sized him up, Zen was able to confirm that Titus Zhao's strength wasn't that simple at all. But the other warrior named Logan Yun was even stronger. Space was constantly twisting around his body, forcibly blocking all the flames. Was it true that he really was invincible? Did he just use the space power to create thin layers of space to generate an armor? Zen wondered in his heart. At the certain realization, Zen's eyes flashed. That was the 3rd layer of space law. Even to him, that was something he was unable to comprehend for the time being. It was true that the 4 Divine Kingdoms really had a very deep foundation. Chapter 778, Quarrels. Logan Yun's proficiency in space law was actually more than what the other warriors had expected. Who knew that he had the ability to manipulate space into creating a layer of armor over his body? The question now was whether his opponent could tear through space. Majority of the warriors at the virtual tribulation realm did not have the strength to break through space. This meant that there was a high probability for Logan to emerge from this fight unscathed. Zen couldn't help but be amazed at how profound the inheritances of the 4 Divine Kingdoms were. With these inheritances, warriors in the Divine Kingdoms were supposed to be stronger than those in the central region. Titus Zhao's attack was extremely sharp, but Logan Yun's suppression made it hard for him to unleash his full force. If only he had the strength to tear apart space, or if only he had also been skilled in space law, then Titus Zhao would have stood a chance. However, it was becoming quite apparent that his fierce attacks and formidable fire law would not be enough to win him this fight. The result was obvious to Zen at least. I'm afraid Titus Zhao will lose, he murmured to himself, but the warriors beside him still heard it. To put into context, Titus Zhao was heralded as one of the most powerful warriors of the Wisteria martial house and even in the entire Starfield Divine Kingdom. The warriors from his martial house looked up to him and prayed hard for his victory. So to suddenly hear an unknown warrior from the Harlan Divine Kingdom proclaim that their hero would lose was unacceptable to them. "How dare you say that?" one of the warriors from the Wisteria martial house shouted at Zen. "Are you courting death, you brat?" Zen was quite startled at their outburst, but tried to not take their reactions to heart. "Titus is our Wisteria martial house's top warrior. He's also one of the 6 strongest in our Starfield Divine Kingdom. You're not at all qualified to judge him. Yeah, he's just someone from a divine kingdom that ranks last. Besides, it's obvious that the Jade martial house is even far more inferior to the Dark martial house. I heard its strongest warrior is someone called Gregory Zahn. Ha, I bet this Gregory won't last 10 seconds in a fight against someone like Titus. Just ignore him, he's clearly delusional." Zen rolled his eyes at their heckling. He couldn't really be mad at them. These warriors were flowers raised in greenhouses and had been given the best inheritances by their divine kingdoms. Zen understood that they'd think more in terms of black and white absolutes. He chose to remain silent and be the bigger person. However, the warriors of the Jade martial house couldn't just let the insults pass. "What did you say? Did you just say that our Jade martial house is inferior to the Dark martial house? Maybe you guys should shut up because your mouths stink of lies. You all think your Wisteria martial house is some kind of hotshot. Let's wait and see. Gregory will surely beat the trash out of your warriors." It's hilarious how someone from a martial house made up of eunuchs actually has the balls to talk nonsense like these. That last diss made by a warrior from the Jade martial house was what really burned the egos of the warriors of the Wisteria martial house. Yes, the Wisteria martial house was indeed ranked number 1 in the entire Starfield Divine Kingdom. Martial houses were established with the support of the Divine Kingdoms and were mostly founded by war kings or war emperors. Wisteria martial house, however, was founded by eunuchs. It might be surprising at first, but eunuchs actually made mighty warriors. They had a natural advantage when it came to cultivation since, after castration, they could then train and hone their methods and skills with pure positive energy that they could never lose. Not only that, but Wisteria martial house also had several warriors at the Soul Sea realm with them, and they were all eunuchs. But, no matter its strength and prestige, the warriors from other martial houses still called it the eunuch martial house behind its back. There wasn't really anything they could do about it. It would be impossible to shake off the title. Besides, they weren't calling that to their faces, so the warriors from the Wisteria martial house let it slide. However, the Jade martial house had gotten pissed and pointed out their biggest insecurity right at their faces. The warriors of the Wisteria martial house glared daggers at those of the Jade martial house. Enraged, they circulated their life vitality in preparation for a retaliation. The warriors of the Jade martial house stood with their heads held high. They were not afraid. All of them were warriors at the virtual tribulation realm. Why should they be afraid? At that moment, just as the tension was at its height, a majestic aura enveloped all of them. It was the aura of a powerful warrior at the Soul Sea realm who had suppressed them in an effort to calm the disturbance. The aura pressed firmly onto the heads of warriors of both martial houses. It was as if there was a solid mountain that bore down on their foreheads and kept them in place. Even Gregory was no exception. His breathing was labored and there was an unexplained heaviness in his limbs so that he couldn't even find the strength to lift a finger. This was the power of a warrior at the Soul Sea realm. Zen was the only one who remained calm and indifferent. He gazed up at the mighty warrior in the distance and gave him a faint smile. This surprised the warrior at the Soul Sea realm. He could feel that there was a warrior that had not been affected by his aura at all. He gave Zen a curious look before inevitably retracting his power over the other warriors. Since when did the Jade martial house have such a powerful figure? Even my aura couldn't suppress him. He thought to himself, positively intrigued. The soul of a warrior at the Soul Sea realm was trained to be in the fighting soul realm. Under his aura, those warriors at the virtual tribulation realm should have effectively been suppressed and unable to move. Zen didn't show any signs of moving, but the warrior at the Soul Sea realm just knew that he was unaffected. A warrior at the virtual tribulation realm possesses a soul at the fighting soul realm. It's impossible. Is it because he has a magic treasure with him that could resist my soul pressure? But not even the crown prince of the Harlan Divine Kingdom would have such an artifact, much less a mere warrior at the virtual tribulation realm. He remained curious but said nothing. His duty was to maintain order during the competition. This matter did not really concern him. Therefore, he only gave Zen a look and ignored him. Once the ruckus died down, the battle's outcome had already been decided. Just as Zen expected, Titus Zhao's attack was fierce and probably the most powerful among the warriors at the virtual tribulation realm present. However, brute strength would not be enough to pull him through this fight. The warriors gathered here were all talented, young individuals with their own trump cards and cultivation methods. Logan Yun's space armor was ingenious and proved effective in the fight against Titus. Bang! Titus Zhao crashed onto the ground. He hissed in pain before pulling himself into a kneeling position. Your Majesty, forgive me, I have failed you. Scott smiled in understanding. Please rise. Victory and defeat are integral parts of a soldier's life. There is nothing to forgive. Do not worry about it. The Emperor didn't blame him and even comforted him. Nonetheless, Titus Zhao still felt dejected. He was supposed to represent both the Wisteria Martial House and Starfield Divine Kingdom in battle, but he felt that he had failed them and his peers' expectations. It was a given that the warriors of the Starfield Divine Kingdom all had long faces. Many of them even wanted to jump out and challenge Logan Yun to a match because of what had happened. Even if Titus Zhao was their number one, there were still a lot of warriors that were on par with him. Of course they'd feel annoyed rather than awed with the result. Logan Yun couldn't be bothered as he floated in the air. His face was filled with arrogance as he scanned the square and waited for a challenge. He had declared that he was invincible among the warriors at the virtual tribulation realm, which meant that he had full confidence in his own strength. I'll go. I, Victor Lee, challenge you. I'll go. Let me deal with this guy first. The warriors of the Starfield Divine Kingdom were blurting out their challenges left and right, eager to prove themselves after Titus' defeat. However, a voice boomed across the square, challenges are to be carried out in turns, as in accordance with the rules. It is now time for the warriors from Wind Divine Kingdom and Harlan Divine Kingdom to issue their challenges. Lord Randy's and the Crown Prince's eyes both sparkled. The purpose of the challenge was to examine the strength of the Divine Kingdom's younger generation. Both Lord Randy and the Crown Prince were part of this generation, but they could not readily compete and participate due to their noble statuses. Nonetheless, they still had the right to recommend a fighter. The Crown Prince, for example, could order either Gregory or Edwin to fight in his place. Lord Randy, on the other hand, despite also having his own force, could really only recommend Zen since the warrior was the only one that had the qualifications and strength to represent him. The question, however, was if Zen was even willing to fight in his place. Just as he briefly mulled it over, another argument broke out on the square. Titus Zhao's defeat had left many warriors of the Wisteria Martial House dissatisfied. Since they couldn't send out a challenger to beat Logan Yun up, they decided to vent out their anger on the Jade Martial House instead. Isn't your Jade Martial House supposedly powerful? Why don't you guys go out there and show us? Isn't Gregory Zahn your top warrior? Why not send him up there and give it a try? Maybe he'll get beaten up by Logan just like that. Ha, from what I know, the Jade Martial House will end up in an even worse state than we did. Their arguments solidified the Crown Prince's decision. He nodded to his warrior and gave him a smile. Gregory Zahn will represent me to challenge Logan Yun. Gregory nodded, transforming into a beam of light and flew up towards the sky. This made the warriors of the Jade Martial House boil with excitement. You can do it, Gregory. Show them. That brat only knows how to use the space law for defense. You have to beat him as fast as you can. Don't allow them to look down on us. The atmosphere was heated and Gregory wasted no time. He flew forward and suddenly took out a saber behind him. The blade was thick, resembling the tooth of a wolf and flickered with a faint blue light. A warrior at the virtual tribulation realm has a mid-grade sacred weapon. I wonder if there are divine weapons in the divine kingdoms, Zen thought to himself. He wasn't really concerned with the outcome of this battle. He wasn't born in the Jade Martial House and wasn't really a citizen of the Harlan Divine Kingdom, so he wasn't as invested as the other warriors. The only reason he came here was for Letitia. Still, he needed to observe the battles in order to find out more about the other warriors. He worried a bit though. Since the Crown Prince chose Gregory to represent him, could that mean that Lord Randy might also ask him to fight in his place? It wasn't because he was afraid to fight, but, if he went on stage, he was sure to attract the attention of the York Divine Kingdom's Holy Maiden. What should he do then? He still remembered how this Holy Maiden swore to kill him the last time they met. Chapter 779, Space Chopping Sword. It was in a warrior's nature to fight. Warriors fought with the other warriors, with their fate and even with the heavens. In Zen's mind, there was no fear, only excitement when it came to a challenge. It was only through fighting others that a warrior could truly know his strength. It was competition that allowed one to further advance in the realm of martial arts. Zen itched to challenge all these Divine Kingdom talents in front of him. His body screamed to release his strength and engage all of it in a fight to find out just how strong these warriors were compared to him. However, there was a task at hand. Letitia waited for him back home and he had to collect all the life stones he could carry without ruffling too many feathers. Attracting the attention of the York Divine Kingdom's Holy Maiden and Soul Sea Realm Masters would only bring him a whole lot of unnecessary trouble. So it was rather necessary for him to keep a low profile. But it seemed Lord Randy was about to change all that. Wherever Zen went, there would always be someone who raised him up for all to see, and he wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Lord Randy was certainly going to ask him to fight in his place. Both Lord Randy and the Crown Prince were in a head-to-head battle of proving themselves to Turner Joe, their father and the emperor of their kingdom. Their strength was very much well known, but it was their influence that was vital in gauging their true social power. The Crown Prince had powerful talents like Edwin and Gregory, but Lord Randy only had Zen. There was a reason why he treated Zen so well. Despite his status, Lord Randy regarded the warrior as an equal and was openly honest towards him. This was because he wanted to gain his trust, which could only be done through sincerity. Zen was a difficult person to persuade after all. Furthermore, he truly believed in that young man's potential. He knew that a close relationship with Zen would bring forth good fortune for him. So instead of worrying whether or not Zen was willing to fight for him, Lord Randy was already thinking about when it would be best to send him out. He was determined to have Zen represent him. Meanwhile, Gregory and Logan were quickly thrown into a fierce battle. As the top virtual Tribulation Realm warrior of the Jade Martial House, Gregory truly did not disappoint the warriors of Harlan Divine Kingdom. His attacks were even stronger than Titus's. His mid-grade sacred weapon also proved to be effective in making a dent against Logan's space armor. Although it could never hope to shatter it, the blade left enough marks on the otherwise impenetrable armor for the crowd to get excited. If Gregory hit him enough times, Logan's armor was sure to crumble. My saber is called Dragon Tooth, made from the teeth of a genuine dragon. Resistance is futile and that armor won't be able to protect you for long. A warrior, who only knows how to retreat, will eventually lose. Gregory sneered. He moved like the wind as he charged towards Logan. Go to perdition, clang. He left another deep slash across the space armor, pushing Logan back a few feet. Everyone's breath hitched. Gregory's blade intent had contained the power to break through anything, and that included space itself. Zen nodded in approval. Gregory was indeed formidable, and if Logan continued to only resist, his space armor would eventually be broken and he would be left defenseless. Or would he? Zen sighed to himself once he realized something. Logan had only used his space armor to block Gregory's attack since the beginning, but he hadn't brought out all his cards to the game yet. He had yet to show his true strengths. Gregory shouldn't rejoice. There was still a margin of possibility that he might not beat his opponent. In all honesty, Zen would prefer it if Gregory won. If that happened, Lord Randy would not be able to challenge Gregory since they both came from the same divine kingdom. Thus Zen wouldn't be asked to come out. However, he knew that he was only delaying the inevitable. Zen would have to fight at some point, but he hoped it wouldn't be so soon. The fight between the two warriors was heating up. Gregory's fierce saber skills had proven effective in breaking down Logan's defenses. If he continued with this strategy, Logan would really end up losing. However, Logan wasn't stupid. He knew his opponent had the capacity to attack his defense, so he took the initiative to remove his space armor. It was time that he moved into the offense. He looked at Gregory with contempt before waving his hand and gathering light around his arm. Buzz. There was a vibration and then a slight buzzing sound. Soon enough, the light converged into a hazy, long sword that appeared in Logan's hand. It wasn't a physical sword, but rather, it was the space that was shaped into a long sword, if that made any sense. Essentially, Logan had used space to forge himself a weapon. It seemed that his proficiency in space law allowed him to use it both for defense and offense. That's Logan's space-chopping sword. Oh man, this is going to be exciting. That's Logan's ultimate skill. For Gregory to force him to use it means he really has driven Logan up to a wall. It's truly an impressive feat for Gregory, but he should watch out. That space-chopping sword is definitely built to cut off an opponent's limbs. The warriors' discussions reached Gregory's ears. It seemed that this space-chopping sword wasn't something to be taken lightly. Gregory's eyes were filled with determination. Who said he was taking this lightly? He was someone who came from nothing and worked hard his entire life to rise and become the top warrior among the younger generation in the Jade Martial House. And he would keep working hard in order to gain recognition for his strength. Besides, the Crown Prince himself put his trust in him, so he had to win. One ultimate skill wasn't enough to deter his resolve. Did you hear that? Logan asked indifferently. My space-chopping sword was made to cut your limbs. If you want, you can leave behind one of your hands and I'll let you go. Crack. A loud, resounding crack echoed from the stairs. The Crown Prince had smacked the ironwood armrest of his wheelchair, reducing the entire contraption into dust. Still, he remained seated as he floated in the air. The eunuch beside him was quick to react and fetched another wheelchair for him. He placed it carefully under the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince tutted. "Logan is too presumptuous," he said and settled lightly onto the wheelchair. The rulers of the divine kingdoms could only smile at the Crown Prince's actions. There was no need for them to interfere since the younger members were the ones to handle the matters of the younger generation. Other important figures were also seated on the platform on top of the stairs. There was the Crown Prince of the York Divine Kingdom along with the Holy Maiden who had chuckled at the Harlan Divine Kingdom's Crown Prince. "Are you angry now, Bram?" The Harlan Divine Kingdom was controlled by the Joe clan and the Crown Prince's full name was Bram Joe. Bram Joe snorted but couldn't be bothered by the Holy Maiden. He simply turned his attention back to the sky where the battle was still on. Lord Randy was already feeling at ease. Gregory represented the Harlan Divine Kingdom, but he wasn't his man. The warrior had been invited by Bram Joe and could be regarded as his representative. Even if Gregory lost, it would be to Lord Randy's pleasure. In fact, he would be extremely happy if Edwin also lost. That way, if Zen ever came up on stage, it would make him look even better and prove that he actually had a great eye for remarkable warriors. He hadn't witnessed Zen's true strength yet, but he already had complete trust in him. Back to the battle, Logan had raised his space-chopping sword and launched 3 consecutive attacks against Gregory. The sword was almost transparent given that it was made from space. It was almost invisible and incredibly hard to spot if one did not pay attention. Clang! The space-chopping sword's first strike introduced a few cracks onto Gregory's dragon tooth. Clang! At the second strike, the dragon tooth immediately shattered, unable to withstand the space-chopping sword's power. Clang! The third strike came down upon Gregory himself. It went through his shoulder and cut through the flesh that connected his arm to his torso. The blood was unsightly and Gregory's now severed appendage flopped limply onto the ground. Zen raised an eyebrow at this sudden turn of events. It seemed Logan was indeed outstanding. He's too powerful, he's unbeatable, he is truly worthy of being regarded as the top virtual tribulation realm warrior. Even a mid-grade sacred weapon like the dragon tooth couldn't resist the space-chopping sword. Logan also just cut down his opponent's arm like a piece of vegetable. I wonder who else will dare to challenge him. Logan is unbeatable, ha ha ha. Gregory gritted his teeth and picked up his arm. It was just a fight and losing a body part meant that he lost. They would have to stop now since they still needed to explore the secret land after the competition. A broken arm wasn't that big of a problem. It wasn't anything a warrior like Gregory couldn't fix. However, it would take him a few months to fully recover, which meant he wouldn't be able to explore the secret land at full capacity. Logan made a bow towards War Emperor York who now revealed a faint smile. "Great, excellent work, Logan, I will reward you well." "Thank you, Your Majesty," Logan said, "but I need no reward. Fighting on behalf of the York Divine Kingdom is enough." The crowd was abuzz with discussion. It seemed Logan's arrogance hadn't been misplaced. He truly was strong. "Is there anyone else who wants to challenge me?" Logan asked. Bram Joe pulled a long face. "Edwin, go and challenge him," he ordered. He wanted to lose his temper and punish Logan but it wasn't really appropriate given the context of the situation. Logan was a warrior of the York Divine Kingdom and he won fairly against Gregory. The only thing Bram Joe could do was to pin his hopes on Edwin. According to the rules, only the Wind Divine Kingdom and the Starfield Divine Kingdom are allowed to issue a challenge. Bram Joe forgot the rule because of his hanger. "Don't be impatient, Bram, or others will laugh at you," Turner told his son calmly. War Emperor York chuckled in agreement. "Turner's right. There are some things that just can't be rushed." Turner shot a cold glance at War Emperor York. The 4 great divine kingdoms depended on and restrained each other, but it could not be denied that the York Divine Kingdom had become quite domineering over the last few years, which made its emperor aloof and a show-off. The wins and losses of a few virtual Tribulation Realm warriors didn't really mean anything for these leaders of the divine kingdoms, but it was still a way for them to passive-aggressively compete with each other. Scott, Starfield Divine Kingdom's ruler, turned to his son, Horace. "Do you have any candidates you'd like to recommend?" Their top warrior had already been defeated by Logan, and Scott was now out of options, so he desperately prayed that his son would be able to help. Horace was the Starfield Divine Kingdom's crown prince and naturally had someone he could send out. "Willard, you fight on my behalf." Chapter 780, 4 Strikes. In the Starfield Divine Kingdom, there were a total of 6 talents who managed to enter the first tier. Despite Titus' defeat, a lot of warriors were still ready to fight. After all, those 6 warriors didn't include people from the royal family of the Starfield Divine Kingdom. The likes of its kingdom's crown prince had a sure spot in the first tier rank. The Harlan Divine Kingdom, which Zen happened to be a part of, was weak compared to the others. Apart from Randy and the Crown Prince Bram, only Gregory and Edwin were most likely to enter the first tier. In addition, Gregory had already been defeated. Technically, they only had Edwin left who could fight the battle. Of course, that was what the other Divine Kingdoms thought about the situation of the Harlan Divine Kingdom. Zen had only made an exhibition of his abilities in the Jade Martial House, but he did not reveal too much of his strength. The other 3 Divine Kingdoms didn't even know of his existence. Under the command of the Crown Prince of the Starfield Divine Kingdom, the martial artist named Willard Yu showed up to battle. If Willard Yu was to be defeated by Logan, then the Starfield Divine Kingdom had lost to Logan twice after Titus. As someone whom the Crown Prince of Starfield Divine Kingdom had highly recommended, Willard had to win. If he was to lose again, then the reputation of their kingdom could suffer. However, the martial artists from the Starfield Divine Kingdom seemed to be very confident in Willard's strength. After he rushed up to the enchanted barrier in the sky, his fellow warriors were once again seething with excitement and hope. The warriors from Wisteria Martial House were the most pumped. Even Willard wasn't exactly from their house, they had great expectations for him. As someone who came from the same kingdom, he could help save the Wisteria Martial House's reputation if he defeated Logan. Willard, you just need to avoid his sword. That guy only has his sword to rely on. He's got nothing else. Right, make sure not to get hit by his sword. With your speed, you can make it, the warriors in the audience suggested. Speed was definitely a pride of Willard. Everyone knew of his impeccable ability. He nodded to the crowd who encouraged him from below, then turned to Logan. Please, he said, gesturing for him to start. Since Logan had already drawn out his space-chopping sword, there was no reason for him to take it back. He held up 3 fingers towards Willard and said, 3 strikes. It will only take me 3 strikes to defeat you. The warriors yelled once more, you're too arrogant. If you really have the guts, Logan, come down here and see if you can avoid getting crushed into meat paste. Show us how you dodge those 3 strikes, Willard. If he doesn't defeat you in 3 strikes as he said, then he's a joke. It would be so fun to look at his humiliated face. Many of the warriors from the Starfield Divine Kingdom resented Logan even before. His words were like gas being poured into flames, making them all the more furious than they already were. It wasn't something that bothered Logan, however. Truly, there were a lot of warriors at the virtual tribulation realm in the 4 Divine Kingdoms. The warriors at the scene were basically at the first or the second tier, and most of them had the divine level talent. But ultimately, only dozens of them could fly up in battle. To Logan, they all were nothing but a joke. The powerful Soul Sea Realm warriors on top of the steps turned a deaf ear to the commotion in the plaza. The heated atmosphere was good for competition. As long as those warriors didn't fight against each other physically, then they didn't step in. Amidst all the noise, Logan decided to launch the initial attack. He waved his space-chopping sword and took a step forward. He was able to come near Willard in just one swift move. It was like he traversed through space and not anyone had noticed. To everyone's surprise, the transparent sword in his hand was already slashing at Willard's head. That method of traveling through space was something Zen was very familiar with. It could cause the opponent to not see what was coming and get caught off guard. It shocked Willard to see how fast and brisk Logan was. Truth be told, he had already lost his confidence the moment he found out he was going to fight against Logan. His strength was similar only to that of Titus. They had competed against each other for lots of times, and results always varied. However, Titus' victory count was more than his. Even so, Logan had defeated Titus, so it could mean that Titus' strength wasn't enough. How possibly could Willard stand a chance to win him? But it was the order of the Crown Prince, and he was left with no other choice but to put up a fight. If the strength of 2 martial artists was at the same level, then it was often the strong-willed one won. If one lost his confidence and momentum, he had nothing. When he heard about what the martial artists from the Starfield Divine Kingdom in the crowd had said, he also made a plan in his heart. Since Logan had boasted that he would defeat him with 3 strikes, then he needed to avoid those first. So instead of facing Logan's first strike, he chose to escape. Whoosh! Since he was well known for his speed, Willard had extraordinary bodily movements, too. Logan's first strike was only able to cut a little piece from the hems of Willard's robe, nothing more. Then, he began to spin in high speed inside the enchanted barrier. His intention was obvious. It was to avoid Logan's space-chopping sword. Seeing this scene, Zen couldn't help but slightly shake his head. As the saying went, a brave hero always wins the most fierce competition. If one didn't even have the courage to face the enemy head-on, then how could he win? Could it be that this fellow expected that Logan would let him go after 3 strikes? He was too naive. The 3 strikes that Logan mentioned were only to show off his power and to give Willard a little bit of pressure. Furthermore, he didn't mention that he would admit defeat if he failed to take Willard down after 3 strikes. Whoosh! Despite Willard's rapid movements, Logan was quite seasoned in space law. He only needed to take a single step to catch up with Willard and strike him with his sword. The space-chopping sword was like an invisible venomous snake that charged ferociously towards Willard. The expression on Willard's face shifted drastically. He was scared. He had used all his skills as he forcefully swerved in the air. However, the sword was able to graze past his neck and sliced off a large portion of his thick, long hair. Instead of showing his disappointment, Willard showed his smiling face. After all, he still avoided Logan's second strike. You've dodged the second strike. Well done, Willard. One more strike to avoid and you will make it. Come on, Willard, you got this. The martial artists from the Starfield Divine Kingdom all exclaimed. All of them also knew that Willard was only trying to get past the first 3 strikes. He knew quite well that more was coming. At the top of the steps, the Crown Prince of the Wind Divine Kingdom, who had remained silent for the most part, coldly looked at the cheering martial artists and said, "A bunch of idiots." A lot of other warriors shared the same thoughts as Zen. What could happen after Willard dodged those 3 strikes? He couldn't keep up like that. He didn't stand a chance to win. Very quickly, Logan launched his 3rd strike. The space-chopping sword directly swung past Willard's back but was only able to slice a huge cut on his robe. With just one twist of his body, Willard had successfully dodged the 3rd strike. So far, he had not yet been injured. 3 strikes. You weren't able to triumph over me in just 3 strikes. You were wrong. You can't defeat me in just 3 strikes. The joy Willard expressed made it seem as if he had won at that moment. He was laughing loudly, and his face lit up with extreme excitement. Before he could continue rejoicing, the space-chopping sword followed him like a shadow. A trace of space-chopping sword passed by and left a straight line right beside where he stood. As the line disappeared, people saw Willard's arm fall off from his body, hitting the ground with a thud. Thick spurts of blood began to gush out of his shoulder. At that moment, Willard was too vexed to feel the pain. He glared at Logan with immense disdain and asked, "Didn't you say you'd only use 3 strikes on me?" Logan broke his words. It was him who announced that the battle shall end in 3 strikes. What a cunning mongrel. You should be ashamed. Either apologize or kill yourself, Logan. Many Starfield Divine Kingdom warriors joined in. All of them were angered by Logan's rather phony words. A sympathetic smile appeared on Logan's face as he said, "Did you hear me say that 3 strikes will immediately end the battle? You must have been dreaming. I just said I'd take you down in 3 strikes. Since 3 strikes didn't suffice, I attacked again. This is a battle. What are you thinking about? Who told you I'm not allowed to do such a thing?" Ultimately, the strong ones ruled the world. When Logan mentioned 3 strikes, it was some kind of rule he made. And since he made the rule, he could change it any time he pleased. Even if other people didn't approve, they weren't strong enough to disobey. Upon hearing his words, the Starfield Divine Kingdom martial artists fell silent. Each and every single one of them had nothing to say at that very moment. Logan then turned his head and swept his eyes across the warriors of the Starfield Divine Kingdom and said, "You are too weak. What else can you do apart from causing a commotion down there? If you think you can take on me, come up here. I'm waiting." "Huh, stop making it sound like you're that strong. Must we remind you that you are only at the late stage of the virtual tribulation realm?" There were still a few others who remained unconvinced and still chose to argue with him. Shaking his head, Logan continued, "I'm not as strong as you think. In fact, I'm pretty weak. In this world, most martial artists are trash like you. My abilities are only slightly higher than yours. And because I'm a little more hardworking than the lot of you are, I have enough reasons to stand out among all of you." When Logan said all those things, everyone was speechless for a moment. At that time, War Emperor York suddenly clapped his hands. "Logan, well said," War Emperor York cheered. The reason why the 4 divine kingdoms were able to exterminate the dragon lineage human was that they had help from the human race in the upper world. Back then, the humans of the upper world had forcefully opened up a reverse spirit channel in order to help the 4 divine kingdoms and provide them with assistance. It was a historical moment. Unlike the martial artists in the central region, those from the 4 divine kingdoms knew a lot about the upper world. In the hearts of the hundreds of millions of martial artists in the central region, the upper world was only a vague concept. But for the martial artists of the 4 divine kingdoms, they had actually witnessed the strength and advantages of the martial artists of the upper world. Although Logan didn't say anything about the warriors of the upper world, how could the many virtual tribulation realm martial artists not get the implication of his words? In front of the martial artists from the 4 divine kingdoms, he wasn't shy of his pride. However, thinking about the masters in the upper world humbled him greatly. Only when he was compared to the upper world talents could he be considered weak. Logan's words echoed throughout the inner thoughts of many powerful masters of the Soul Sea realm. Those who had lived for 10,000 years shared one great regret in their hearts. All of them weren't able to ascend to the upper world. In the 4 divine kingdoms, they could undeniably dominate a place. But as martial artists, their pursuit was not limited in that continent. Moreover, being in the Soul Sea realm wasn't enough for them. Therefore, after living for about 10,000 years, many powerful masters at the Soul Sea realm had left the Divine Kingdom continent to search for more opportunities in the endless mysterious seas. They even wanted to find ways to enter other great worlds. Up until now, no one at the Soul Sea realm had succeeded.